with the local Environment Agency area director to have a look at asking that question about what further evidence is required to enable them to seek a prosecution in this matter, then of course if he's not satisfied with that after having that meeting, then to write into the Nature Minister. Sir John Joseph.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It took 4 years before statutory bodies did anything from it was originally reported about Horswood near my constituency. So can the Minister tell us more about how she hopes to work with local authorities like mine in Ashford to ensure immediate actions are taken against people committing these appalling crimes?
I thank my honourable friend, and he's right to be angry about the incidents that he's seeing in his constituency, and it's one of the reasons why we've increased the Environment Agency funding by 50% for waste crime enforcement. And of course we're always keen to work with all local authorities and share best practice to ensure that all of them are going after these waste criminals.
Richard Ford.
Deputy Speaker, Devon County Council received almost 5,000 reports of fly tipping last year. And the Police Rural Affairs team supported East Devon District Council and the Environment Agency in a fly tipping engagement event. And it saw examples of tyres and plastic wrap. But will the Minister please speak with her counterparts at the Home Office about bolstering rural affairs teams in police constabularies such as Devon and Cornwall?
I thank the honourable gentleman, and as luck would have it, there happens to be on the front bench just here the Home Affairs team who will have heard his question.
Steve Race.
Madam Deputy Speaker, residents in Exeter raised with me the appalling fly tipping in the glorious countryside around our city, particularly in Stoke Woods within my constituency. It's rarely individuals, as we've heard. This is about dodgy operators, cowboy operators that are ruining our countryside. I'm pleased that the government is cracking down on them, but we've got to break the business model. Can the Minister set out how the Department is working across government to tackle the financial incentives of waste crime, which would also help to support the many legitimate, responsible waste companies that do exist?
I thank my honourable friend, and he's quite right to highlight there are legitimate companies out there, but they're also waste criminals. And that's why the Environment Agency has launched its Economic Crime Unit, which targets the financial motivation behind offending and using financial mechanisms to inhibit the ability of offenders, including organised crime groups, to operate.
Ayub Khan.
Mr. Speaker, in Birmingham Perry-Barr, we have a serious fly tipping issue, but it's not just Birmingham Perry-Barr, it's actually Birmingham because of the bin strikes that we've got. Despite the protestations from local residents about getting CCTV cameras, the City Council says they have no funding available. So 2 questions for the Minister, please. Number 1, does she feel that the City Council, Labour and City Council, should re-enter negotiations with the bin workers, given that we now have agency staff also striking? And will this government give additional resourcing to Birmingham City Council for enforcement, CCTV cameras and the like?
I do think, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it is a shame that an issue is raised here, but yet unfortunately on the ground the honourable gentleman does not seem to be able to work cross-party to actually deal with this issue. I encourage him to put party politics to a side and actually work with people in the local area to bring this issue to an end.
Dave Robertson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in January, criminals dumped 2 lorry loads of rubbish on Watery Lane just outside the city of Lichfield in my constituency. That dump was so large that it blocked access to the road and in the process stopped emergency services being able to access 9 properties. One of the residents in those properties did require chemo and is having issues with his blood pressure and occasionally needs to call an ambulance. Given that that is such a serious impact on people's lives, can the Minister outline whether the government is looking to introduce an aggravating factor for exactly that situation, so that if fly tips prevent access to properties, and the risk of life is treated like an aggravating factor, and the waste criminals will receive larger sentences for that purpose?
I thank my honourable friend, and I'm so sorry to hear about the issue that he's raised with his constituents. It's shocking that they're unable to access the treatment they need because of the appalling waste criminals, and I am sure that we will go after the waste criminals with every power we have to ensure that they are brought to justice for all of their crimes.
Adam.
Speaker, fly tipping is a national scourge, we all agree with that. But in addition to causing dismay, it causes a lot of disunity between communities. But furthermore, according to the 2018 report, it cost us £392 million to clear up fly tipping. So will the Minister agree to give more resources to our local councils to fund enforcement measures like cameras and implement a policy of zero tolerance, prosecuting offenders and imposing custodial sentences on those that break the law?
He was right to mention that the issue that he's having in his constituency and, of course, the need for more powers. But he also requests more funding, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is why I'm sure he'll be supporting our budget next week.
Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents are quite rightly appalled by fly tipping. It's a particular problem in the West End of Morecambe, but also affects the beautiful countryside in my area. So can the Minister tell me what action the government is taking to tackle this appalling crime?
Thank my humble friend. And fly tipping is a serious crime. It does blight local communities. It blights our beautiful countryside, as well as we've heard our urban environments. And dealing with it does cost taxpayers and businesses a huge amount of money. So we're supporting councils to seize and crush vehicles of fly tippers. We're forcing fly tippers to clear up their own mess and taking steps to provide statutory fly tipping enforcement guidance to help councils make full and proper use of their enforcement powers.
Jim Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for her answers. I think nobody in this House doubts the Honourable Lady's commitment to addressing this issue, and we very much welcome that and thank her for it. The discovery of the Mowbray illegal dump in Londonderry in 2013 revealed an enormous operation involving criminals who buried vast amounts of waste and showed the scale of the problem and the finance available. It is clear that the Northern Ireland Environmental Agency in Northern Ireland is historically underfunded and cannot investigate thoroughly reports of incidents which lead to more environmental waste crime. Indeed, cross-border organised crime and illegal waste been dumped in Northern Ireland. So can I ask the Minister this question? It is a devolved matter, but will the Minister commit to discussion and to liaise with the Northern Ireland Assembly on how better to work together for the investigatory bodies for these crimes throughout the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for, as always, raising an important issue for his constituents, and I am sure that the Nature Minister is regularly meeting with the Northern Ireland Assembly and that she can get back to you and update you on those conversations.
David Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Stoke-on-Trent, under the leadership of Councillors Wazir and Ashworth, we've had the successful IDIOT campaign. That stands for illegal dumping in our towns. As a result, we've seen the numbers of fines go up and the amount of fly tipping is reducing too. Now, would the Minister agree with me that the IDIOT campaign is an aptly titled name for such a campaign?
I thank my honourable friend. I mean, there are many things that we could call idiot campaigns, perhaps in here, but let's not get diverted into discussing those. But I pay full tribute to his local council for the work they're doing on tackling this hugely important issue, and full credit to him for raising it in here.
Can I thank the Minister for her answers this afternoon? If any members are planning to leave, could they do so quickly and quietly? But that's given the front benches a couple of moments to swap over. Before I call the Home Secretary to make her statement, I'm sorry that once again Mr. Speaker has asked me to remind ministers of the requirement in the government's own ministerial code that major new policy announcements should be made in this House in the first instance and not to the media. This afternoon's statement has already been the subject of very extensive media coverage, both over the weekend and this morning, including a lot of policy detail. Honourable and right honourable members on the government benches were very quick to criticise ministers in the previous government for this kind of behaviour, but the Home Office seems to have a particular problem with making media announcements before ministers come to make statements to the House. I know that the committee chaired by the Honourable Member for North Dorset is looking at this matter, and I look forward to reading their recommendations. Statement. Asylum policy. The Home Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I will make a statement about how we restore order and control to our borders. I do so as this government publishes the most significant reform to our migration system in modern times. This country will always offer sanctuary to those fleeing danger. But we must also acknowledge that the world has changed, and our asylum system has not changed with it. Our world is a more volatile and more mobile place. Huge numbers are on the move. While some are refugees, others are economic migrants seeking to use and abuse our asylum system. And even genuine refugees are passing through other safe countries, searching for the most attractive place to seek refuge. The burden that has fallen on this country has been heavy. 400,000 have sought asylum here in the last 4 years. Over 100,000 people now live in asylum accommodation, and over half of refugees remain on benefits 8 years after they have arrived. To the British public who foot the bill, the system feels out of control and unfair. It feels that way because it is. The pace and scale of change has destabilised communities. It is making our country a more divided place. There will never be a justification for the violence and racism of a minority. But if we fail to deal with this crisis, we will draw more people down a path that starts with anger and ends in hatred. I have no doubt about who we really are in this country. We are open, tolerant, and generous. But the public rightly expect that we can determine who enters this country and who must leave. To maintain the generosity that allows us to provide sanctuary, we must restore order and control. Rather than deal substantively with this problem, the last Conservative government wasted precious years and £700 million on their failed Rwanda plan, with the lamentable result of just 4 volunteers removed from the country. As a result, they left us with the grotesque chaos of asylum seekers housed in hotels, shuttled around in taxis, with the taxpayer footing the bill. My predecessor as Home Secretary picked up this dreadful inheritance and rebuilt the foundations of a collapsed asylum system. Decision-making has been restored, with a backlog now 18% lower than when we entered office. Removals have increased, reaching nearly 50,000 under this government. Immigration enforcement has hit record levels, with over 8,000 arrests in the last year. The Border Security Bill is progressing through Parliament, and my predecessor struck a historic agreement with the French, which means small boat arrivals can now be sent back to France. These are vital steps, but we must go further. Today we have published Restoring Order and Control, a new statement on our asylum policy. Its goals are twofold. Firstly, to reduce illegal arrivals into this country, and secondly, to increase removals of those with no right to be here. It starts by accepting an uncomfortable truth. While asylum claims fall across Europe, they are rising here. And that is because of the comparative generosity of our asylum offer, when compared to so many of our European neighbours. This generosity is a factor that draws people to these shores on a path that runs through other safe countries. Nearly 40% come on small boats and over perilous channel crossings, but a roughly equal number come here legally via a visitor, work or study visa and then go on to claim asylum. They do so because refugee status is the most generous route into this country. An initial grant lasts 5 years, which is then converted almost automatically into permanent settled status. In other European countries, things are done differently. In Denmark, refugee status is temporary, and they provide safety and sanctuary until it is possible for a refugee to return home. In recent years, asylum claims have hit a 40-year low. And now, across Europe, countries are tightening their systems in similar ways. We must act too. We will do so by making refugee status temporary, not permanent. A grant of refugee status will last 2.5 years, not 5. It will be renewed only if it is impossible for a refugee to return home. Permanent settlement will now come at 20 years, not 5. I know this country welcomes people who contribute, and for those who want to stay and are willing and able to, we will create a new work and study visa route solely for refugees, with a quicker path to permanent settlement. To encourage refugees into work, we will also consult on removing benefits for those who are able to work but choose not to. Outside of the most exceptional circumstances, family reunion will not be possible, with a refugee only able to bring family over if they have joined a work and study route and if qualifying tests are met. While over 50,000 were granted refugee status in the last year, more than 100,000 claimants and failed asylum seekers remain in taxpayer-funded accommodation. And we know that criminal gangs use the prospect of free bed and board to promote their small boat crossings. We have already announced that we will empty asylum hotels by the end of the Parliament, and we are exploring a number of large military sites as an alternative. We will now also remove the 2005 legislation that created a duty to support asylum seekers, reverting to a legal power to do so instead. While we will continue to support those who play by the rules, those who do not, be that through criminality or antisocial behaviour, can have their support removed. We will also remove our duty to support those who have a right to work. It is right that those who do receive support pay for it if they can. So those with income or assets will have to contribute to the cost of their stay. This will end the absurdity that we currently experience, where an asylum seeker receiving £800 each month from his family and who had recently acquired an Audi was receiving free housing at the taxpayer's expense, and the courts judged that we could do nothing about it. Mr. Speaker, these measures are designed to tackle the pull factors that draw people into this country. But reducing the number of arrivals is just half of the story. We must also enforce our rules and remove those who have no right to be here. This will mean restarting removals to countries where they have been paused. In recent months, we have begun voluntary removal of failed asylum seekers to Syria once again. However, there are still many failed asylum seekers here from Syria, most of whom fled a regime that has since been toppled. Other countries are planning to enforce removals, and we will follow suit. Where a failed asylum seeker cannot be returned home, we will also continue to explore the possibility of return hubs, with negotiations ongoing. We must remove those who have failed asylum claims, regardless of who they are. Today, we are not removing family groups, even when we know that their home country is perfectly safe. There are, for instance, around 700 Albanian families living in taxpayer-funded accommodation, having failed their asylum claims. This is true despite an existing returns agreement, and that Albania is a signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights. So we will now begin the removal of families. Where possible, we will encourage a voluntary return, but where an enforced return is necessary, that is what we will do. Where the barrier to a return is not the individual nor the UK government, but the receiving country, we will take action. I can announce today that we have told Angola, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Namibia that if they do not comply with international rules and norms, we will impose visa penalties on them. And I am sending a wider message here. Unless other countries heed this lesson, further sanctions will follow. Much of the delay in our removals, however, comes from the sclerotic nature of our own system. In March of this year, the appeals backlog stood at 51,000 cases. This government has already increased judicial sitting days, but reform is required. So we will create a new appeals body staffed by professional independent adjudicators, and we will ensure there is early legal representation available to advise claimants and ensure their issues are properly considered. Cases with a low chance of success will be fast-tracked, and claimants will have just one opportunity to claim and one to appeal, ending the merry-go-round of claims and appeals that frustrate so many removals. While some barriers to removal are the result of process, Others are substantive issues related to the law itself. There is no doubt that the expanded interpretation of parts of the European Convention on Human Rights has contributed. This is particularly true of Article 8, the right to a family life. The courts have adopted an ever-expanding interpretation of this right, and as a result, many people have been allowed to come to this country when they would otherwise have had no right to. And we have been unable to remove others when the case for doing so seems overwhelming. This includes cases like an arsonist sentenced to 5 years in prison, whose deportation was blocked on the grounds that his relationship with his sibling may suffer. And more than half of those detained are now delaying or blocking their removal by raising a last-minute rights claim. Article 8 is a qualified right. That means we are not prevented from removing individuals or refusing an application to move to the UK if it is in the public interest. To narrow Article 8 rights, we will therefore make 3 important changes in both domestic law and our immigration rules. Firstly, we will define what exactly a family is, narrowing this down to parents and their children. Secondly, we will define the public interest test so the default becomes a removal or refusal, with Article 8 rights only permissible in the most exceptional circumstances. Thirdly, we will tighten where Article 8 claims can be heard, ensuring only those who are living in the UK can lodge a claim rather than their family members overseas, and that all claims are heard first by the Home Office and not in a courtroom. We will also pursue international reform of a second element of the European Convention, the application of Article 3, the prohibition on torture and inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. We will never return anyone to be tortured in their home country. But the definition of degrading treatment has expanded into the realm of the ridiculous. Today we have criminals we seek to deport, but discover we cannot because the prisons in their home country have cells that are deemed too small, or even mental health provision that is not as good as our own. As Article 3 is an absolute right, a public interest test cannot be applied. For that reason, we are seeking reform at the Council of Europe, and we do so alongside international partners who have raised similar concerns. But it is not just international law that binds us. According to data from 2022, over 40% of those detained for removal claim they were modern-day slaves. This well-intentioned law is being abused by those who seek to frustrate a legitimate removal. So I will bring forward legislation that tightens the modern slavery system to ensure that it protects those it was designed for and not those who seek to abuse it. Taken together, Madam Deputy Speaker, these are significant reforms. They are designed to ensure our asylum system is fit for the modern world and that we retain public consent for the very idea of providing refuge. We will always be a country that offers protection to those fleeing peril, just as we did in recent years when Ukraine was invaded, when Afghanistan was evacuated, and when we repatriated Hong Kongers. For that reason, as order and control is restored, we will open new, capped, safe and legal routes into this country. These will make sponsorship the primary means by which we resettle refugees, with voluntary and community organisations given greater involvement to both receive refugees and support them, working within caps set by government. We will also create a new route for displaced students to study in the UK and another for skilled refugees to work here. And of course, we will always remain flexible to new crises across the world as they happen. I know the British people do not want to close the doors, but until we restore order and control, those who seek to divide us will grow stronger. It is our job as a Labour government to unite where there is division. So we must now build an asylum system for the world as it is, one that restores order and control, one that opens safe and legal routes to those fleeing danger across the world, and one that sustains our commitment to providing refuge for this generation and those to come. I know the country we are. We are open, tolerant and generous. We are the Greater Britain that those on this side of the House believe in, not the littler England that some would wish we would become. These reforms are designed to bring unity where others seek to divide. Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement, most of which I read in the Sunday Telegraph, actually. But I am pleased that she is bringing forward measures to crack down on illegal immigration. It's not enough, but it is a start, and it's also a change. It's a change from her previous position in opposition of a general amnesty for illegal migrants. But I do want to praise the new Home Secretary, Madam Deputy Speaker. She's bringing fresh energy and a clearer focus to this problem, and she has got more done in 70 days in the job than her predecessor did in a year. She seems to get what many on the benches behind refuse to accept. She is right to say that if we fail to deal with the crisis, we will draw more people to a path that starts with anger and ends in hatred. But we will also allow our English Channel to operate as an open route into this country for anyone prepared to risk their lives and pay criminal gangs. This is not fair. It is not fair on British citizens, it is not fair on those who come here legally, and it is not fair on those in genuine need who are pushed to the back of the queue because the system is overwhelmed. Anyone who cannot see by now that simply tinkering with the current system isn't going to fix this problem is either living in la-la land or being willfully obstructive. It is a shame that it has taken Labour a year in office to realise there is a borders crisis. Yes. I don't know why they're chuntering. What was their first act in government? Her predecessor's first act was to scrap the Rwanda plan, which was already, yes, they're cheering, it was already starting to act as a deterrent before it even got off the ground. And before it started, Labour threw away all of our hard work, the taxpayers' money. They're the ones who have wasted their money, not us. But this statement, Madam Deputy Speaker, is an admission that her predecessor's immigration and borders bill will not work. But I'm glad to see them now changing course. The powers they're using in this bill, they all voted down when we were in government. They wouldn't be able to do that if we hadn't got it through. None of them know the work that was done. They're just cheering nonsensically, but we know what has happened since they came into office. In fact, the Home Secretary will know that in the 70 days that she has been in office, 10,000 people have crossed the Channel. And in the last year, we have seen record levels of asylum claims. The problem has got worse since Labour came into office and is getting even worse by the day. But I am afraid to tell her that what she is announcing is not going to work on its own. And some of these measures will, in fact, take us backwards. I say that to her with no ill will, and I hope she believes me when I say I genuinely want her to succeed. Because on this side of the House, we are speaking from experience. We know how difficult this is. It is, we are. And we're not going to take any lectures from the people who voted down every single measure to control immigration. Some of the measures she is announcing today, Madam Deputy Speaker, are undoubtedly positive steps. Baby steps, but positive nonetheless. We welcome making refugee status temporary, and we welcome removing the last Labour government's legislation that created a duty to support asylum seekers. She's right to do that. Yeah. However, some of what she is announcing simply does not go far enough. On this side of the House, we believe that anyone who arrives illegally, especially from safe countries, should be deported and banned from claiming asylum. Does the Home Secretary agree that anyone who comes to this country illegally should be deported? I'd like to know, I think the country would like to know, because this announcement means that some people who arrive will be allowed to stay. They just need to wait 20 years before getting permanent settlement. That does not remove the pull factor. But the main problem is that for as long as the UK is in the ECHR, illegal immigrants and those exploiting our system will use human rights laws to block anything she does to solve this. I know this because I saw it happen again and again over the last 4 years. I know she is seeing it too. We even saw it this year with the Prime Minister's one-in, one-out scheme, which has seen people return to France come back yet again on small boats. I can guarantee that her plan to reinterpret Article 8 will not work. We tried this already. Strasbourg and UK case law will prevail. And I agree with her that the definition of degrading treatment is overinterpreted. But renegotiating Article 3 internationally will take years. Years we don't have, if it were even possible, but the fact is it isn't. We know this because a small group of EU countries tried this earlier and they were dismissed by the Secretary General of the Council of Europe. Her government did nothing to support them, so I'm not convinced that it's the Prime Minister's negotiating skills that are going to sort out that problem. The fact is, we have looked at this issue from every possible direction, and the reality is that any plan that doesn't include leaving the ECHR as a necessary step is wasting time we don't have. Just like their plan to smash the gangs or the one-in, one-out policy, it is time-wasting and it is doomed to fail because of lawfare. We have seen this all before. The tough measures will be challenged in the courts and blocked. The new legal routes she's talking about will be exploited, and the numbers arriving on our shores and disappearing into the black economy will keep on rising. If the Home Secretary is serious about reducing these numbers, and I do believe that she is, she must be bolder. She must take steps to deter illegal immigrants from coming to Britain and deport them as soon as they arrive. Our borders plan does just that, and I know that she has studied it in detail. I've seen the looks. I know that she knows that we would leave the ECHR and ECAT to stop the Strasbourg courts from frustrating deportations, that we'd establish a new removals force to make sure all illegal arrivals are deported. We would end the use of immigration tribunals, judicial review, and legal aid in immigration cases. Those are the things that are slowing us down. And we will sign returns agreements that are backed by visa sanctions to ensure we send illegal arrivals back to their place of origin. I welcome what she's talking about on Angola and Namibia, but all of us in this House know that they are not the ones creating the biggest problems. We need to be bold, serious, and unafraid to do what the British people demand: secure our borders. That is what is in our borders plan. So I urge her to take me up on my offer to work together, not just because we have some ideas she might find useful, but because, judging by her own backbenchers' reaction today, she may find our votes come in handy. Earlier this year, we saw what happened when the government tried to make changes to the welfare bill. The Prime Minister was defeated by his own backbenchers and ended up passing legislation guaranteeing that more money would be spent on welfare. And it doesn't appear that his grip on the party has improved since then. So you can be sure that the MPs behind the Home Secretary are already plotting to block any serious changes she tries to make. We can help her with that. Why are they shaking their heads? We've seen them do it time and time again before. I would say to the Home Secretary, this is a genuine offer in the national interest. We will not play the same game they did, voting things down for no reason, but she must be clear with the House on these questions. How many people will be able to take advantage of the new work and study visa route? And what will the level of the cap be? Will it be 10,000 people? Will it be 100,000 people? The government has separately confirmed they will allow Gazan students to bring dependents. We oppose this, but can she clarify how the government will ensure that people brought to the UK from a territory under Hamas control are not a risk to our security? If she finds that the Human Rights Act and ECHR prevent her from enacting these proposals, will she use primary legislation to resolve this? Has Lord Hermer agreed? By her own admission 3 weeks ago, the Home Office is not yet fit for purpose, so why then are we creating the new legal routes for the Home Office to run? And will she take me up on this serious, genuine offer to meet and discuss how we can work together to resolve this asylum crisis, yes or no? I urge her to put party politics aside, meet with me and my Shadow Home Secretary. Let's find a way to work together.
Order. I was very generous with time then. Home Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Leader of the Opposition for her response to the statement. I see that the Shadow Home Secretary has been subbed out after his performance at Home Office orals. But whether it's the Shadow Home Secretary or the Leader of the Opposition herself, I'm very happy to take on the Conservative Party any day of the week. And let me start by saying we will not be taking any lessons from those opposite on how to run an effective migration system or indeed an asylum system, because I'm afraid to say to the Leader of the Opposition, she knows that her party in government gave up on governing altogether. They gave up on making asylum decisions, creating the huge backlog that it was left to this government to start to deal with. And in our first 18 months in office, removals are up 23% compared to their last 18 months in office. So I will take no lessons from anyone opposite on anything to do with our asylum system, because they simply gave up and went for an expensive gimmick that cost 700 million quid, returned 4 volunteers, and was doomed to failure from the start. I will also say, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition had rather a lot to say about the European Convention on Human Rights. I don't recall the members opposite ever bringing forward any legislation to deal with the application of Article 8, the qualified right to private life, in this House. There was never a bill that sought to clarify the way that Article 8 should apply in our domestic legislation or indeed in our immigration rules. So I'm not going to take any lessons from the people that just never bothered to do that in the first place. It is this government that is rolling up our sleeves, dealing with the detailed, substantive issues that we face and thinking of proper, workable solutions to those matters. And I just say on Article 3, I think the position on Article 3 has changed across Europe. I was over at the Council of Europe in my previous role as Lord Chancellor just before the summer recess earlier on this year, and I was struck by the sheer range of other European partners who want to have this conversation. It is important, I think, that the British government leans into that conversation and seeks to work in collaboration with our European partners. The one thing that will not work is simply saying we're going to come out of the European Convention altogether. That is not and will never be the policy of this government, because we believe reform can be pursued, but that this is an important convention, not least because it actually underpins some of our own returns agreements, including the one with France. And so she talks about how many years it would take for us to think about reform of the convention, but it would also take just as many years, as she well knows, to start renegotiating lots of international agreements which would be affected by us coming out of the convention. So I'm afraid her solution once again will not work. And if she wanted to work together in the national interest, and look, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm always up for working in the national interest, because nothing actually matters more to me than holding our own country together and uniting our country. But they could have started by voting for the Borders Bill, which is currently going through the House and which they have voted against at every opportunity. So forgive me if I don't take this newfound conversion to working together in the national interest with much seriousness, because their own track record suggests it should not be taken seriously. And not be taken seriously, Madam Deputy Speaker, sums up the position of the Conservative Party. These are the people that left this government an abject mess to clear up. They gave up on governing, they gave up on running an effective asylum system, and now they turn up without so much as an apology to the British public, thinking that they've got anything to say that anyone wants to hear.
Before I call the first backbench contribution, can I remind members that in order to expect to be called in a statement, they should have been here from the start of the Home Secretary's statement. There may be members bobbing quite unnecessarily. Florence Eshalomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, the reality is we need an asylum and immigration system based on fairness and consistency. My constituency of Vauxhall and Campbell Green is a testament to this. It's a place that's been made richer because of the people who've come here from all over the world. Some of them have fled persecution and have made a home over many years. I meet these people every week in the community and including in schools, where I see those children excited about their future. When this government came into office last year, they were right to say that their priority in this area is to tackle the huge backlog of unprocessed asylum claims left by their predecessor. Clearing that backlog is a big task, Madam Deputy Speaker, but it is right that we identify who has a right to be here. But by introducing more assessments of those who've been here for many years, making new judgments on safety of a country will take considerable resources. So is the Home Secretary confident that these changes will not have an unintentional consequence and actually make it harder to achieve her goal?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. Let me assure her there will be both the administrative system and the resources needed to underpin the asylum changes that we are making. It is already the case that at the end of the 5-year leave to remain period, there is meant to be an assessment as to whether the country of origin remains a safe country or not. What has ended up happening, though, in practice is that has become an almost effectively an automatic pathway to permanent settlement. That is the thing that we are changing. But what I would ask her to do is look carefully at our protection work and study route, because we will be encouraging those who have sought asylum here, being granted refugee status, to go into work or to study that supports their integration, but it also means that they are making a contribution which actually will retain public support for the system overall.
Yeah. Liberal Democrat spokesperson Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is right that the government is looking for ways to bring order to the asylum system. It was left in total disarray by the Conservatives. Sadly, the government has been too slow to act. Britain has a long and proud history of responding with compassion to people fleeing unimaginable horrors. That should continue in a way that is fair and sustainable. So we welcome some of what the Home Secretary has said on that score. But what is not helpful is the Home Secretary claiming that the country is being torn apart by immigration. Acknowledging the challenges facing our nation is one thing, but stoking division by using immoderate language is quite another. I will, however, welcome news about safe and legal routes. This is something the Liberal Democrats have called for some time, since they were scrapped by the Conservatives, leading to more small boat crossings. But we do have some concerns about the far-reaching detail behind these proposals, which seems to be missing. The Home Secretary is revoking the legal duty to provide asylum seekers with accommodation and says asylum seekers should support themselves and contribute to our society, but she is still banning them from working so they can support themselves, contributing to our society. That makes no sense at all. She relies a lot on Denmark as an example. Denmark lets asylum seekers work after 6 months. So will she. And can she guarantee that the burden to house asylum seekers won't fall on already struggling local councils? And can she guarantee that we won't see a whole-scale transfer of asylum seekers from hotels to the streets? And if the Minister for Border Security and Asylum announced to the media asylum seekers could have jewellery confiscated, is the Home Secretary doing this to raise money or to deter people? And either way, does she acknowledge that many British people will see it as unnecessary and cruel? State-sponsored robbery will certainly not fix a system that costs taxpayers £6 million every day in hotel bills. If the government plans to keep its promise to end hotel use, it must also process the claims of the 90,000 backlog of asylum seekers, something the Liberal Democrats have a plan to do within 6 months using Nightingale-style processing centres. Does the Home Secretary seriously believe that an overstretched Home Office, which has yet to clear the existing backlog, can also undertake reviews of every refugee's status every 2.5 years? The UK must continue to lead international efforts to manage large migratory flows, and because the flow of people comes from Europe, she will need to work with the EU on a solution. The Oxford Migration Observatory has identified a clear Brexit effect. That means people refused asylum in the EU now make a second attempt here, a consequence of the Brexit delivered by the Conservatives and the honourable member for Clacton 2. The Minister refused to answer earlier whether Brexit has harmed our immigration and asylum system. So I'll ask the Home Secretary now, does she think that Brexit has made it easier or more difficult for this country to control its borders and asylum system? And does she think reductions in overseas development spending will reduce or increase migratory flows? We have already made it very clear that we think leaving the ECHR will make no difference to securing our borders and will tear hard-won rights away from British people. It's encouraging that the Home Secretary has said that is not part of the government's plan. Finally, we urge the government to tread carefully, to act with fairness, to act with efficiency, and to act with compassion for local communities in the UK who want this resolved, but also for asylum seekers too.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have to say to the honourable gentleman, I wish I had the privilege of walking around this country and not seeing the division that the issue of migration and asylum system is creating across this country. Unlike him, Unfortunately, I am the one that is regularly called a fucking packy and told to go back home. It is I who knows through my personal experience and that of my constituents just how divisive the issue of asylum has become in our country. And I do say to him, I wish it were possible to say that there isn't a problem here, that there's nothing to see, and that it is all, in fact, just extremist, right-wing talking points. But this system is broken, and it is incumbent on all members of Parliament to acknowledge how badly broken the system is and to make it a moral mission to fix this system so that it stops creating the division that we all see. And I do say to him, I do not think it is acceptable or appropriate for people in this place to not acknowledge the real experience of those who sit outside of this House. We are supposed to be in here to reflect that experience in this House, and I hope that he will approach the debates that we will no doubt have on all of these measures in that spirit. He also accused this government of being too slow to act. I do have to say to him, removals of those who have no right to be in our country are up by 23% in the first 18 months of this Labour government compared to the last 18 months of that former Tory government. That is a government that is getting on with the job. We have made 11,000 enforcement raids, 8,000 arrests, and over 1,000 people with no right to be in this country as a result of those raids have been removed from this country. This is a government that has been getting on with the job, and this is just the next phase of our work as we deal with the broken migration system that we inherited from those opposite. He said that he thought that whilst people who are waiting on their claim should be given the right to work, I think he knows that would be a huge pull factor and increase the number of channel crossings rather than decrease them. That would be our experience in this country. That is why we are not pursuing that policy. But what we have said is for those who are granted refugee status in this country and who can and want to, they will be able to switch into the protection, work and study route so they can start contributing to society. That will help them to integrate, and it will help the communities that they are living in as well. He knows full well that it is not the policy of this government to confiscate jewellery from those who are accessing asylum accommodation. What I would say to him, though, is asylum accommodation is provided to asylum seekers by British taxpayers, and it is right that if people have high-value assets, that they contribute to the cost of that asylum accommodation. I gave in my speech the example of a man who was in supported asylum accommodation paid for by his taxpayers and by mine, who was receiving £800 a month from his family and who had enough money to acquire himself an Audi. I think it is right that the British state should be able to say to such an individual, contribute. We're not saying that we would take everything away and leave that individual destitute, but I think contribution is a fair principle here. And I would be very disappointed to discover that the Liberal Democrats do not support contribution when people can afford to do so to the cost of their asylum accommodation. And Madam Deputy Speaker, he left his remarks on Brexit. I don't have any more to say about that. I'm living in the world as it is today. If he has things to say, I'm sure the House will continue to hear about them.
The Home Secretary should know that language that is not acceptable in this House does not become acceptable if it is attributed to others. She might like to apologise for the language used.
I apologise, Madam Deputy Speaker. I did not mean any discourtesy. I was merely reflecting the truth of words that are used to me.
And I think we all appreciate that. But please, can I urge members to keep their language acceptable in the House? Graham Stringer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I start by saying I fully support the Home Secretary in a statement today. It is a fundamental duty of government to protect our borders and to know who is coming into this country, which we have not known for some time. She has set herself a difficult task, but will she agree to publish targets for all the areas she has outlined in her statement today, particularly a reduction in the number of undocumented and illegal entrants to the country, so that we can check whether it is working, and she may need to alter some of the policies if it is not working.
Thank my honourable friend for his question. What we won't do is set arbitrary targets or caps. We have learnt the lessons of previous governments, and I think that setting a number in that way actually costs public confidence. The better thing to do is to actually get on with delivering these reforms, passing the necessary legislation in this House, delivering them out there in the country, and then assessing them as they go. I have no doubt that there will be much debate and scrutiny in this place and in others about the success of these reforms, and I look forward to answering those questions over the coming months and years, no doubt.
Chair of the Home Affairs Committee, Dame Karen Bradley.
Madam Deputy Speaker. My committee, I'm sure, will want to look closely at the very significant number of announcements that the Home Secretary has made today. But she has referred on a number of occasions to asylum seekers contributing to the support that they're given. And I wonder whether she has made any consideration of setting up a deferred payment scheme much akin to the student loan scheme, so that people, when they are granted asylum and are in work, can start to pay back for the generosity they've received.
I thank the Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and I do very much look forward to my first appearance before her committee, which I hope we can arrange very soon, and I'm sure we will be discussing in detail all of these proposals as well as other matters relating to the Home Office. Let me say on that specific point around further contribution, it is something that we are currently exploring. It's not part of the package of measures today, but I'll happily update the House in due course.
Joe White.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Home Secretary for her statement? Would the Home Secretary agree with me that enforcing the immigration rules, including removals, is in the public interest? Could the Home Secretary provide greater detail on the action the government will take to balance public interest against individual rights?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. We will bring forward legislation in the next session on the specific ways in which we will deal with the application of Article 8 to immigration cases, and also how we will update our immigration rules as well. I'm happy to discuss with her how that legislation will be developed over the coming weeks, but the intention is to do exactly as I said in my statement, in particular to define what is a family, to define how the public interest test is used so that it is only used in the most exceptional of circumstances, and to tighten the who and the where of how Article 8 claims can be made. Taken together, we believe that that will ensure that we are able to ensure that the application of Article 8 is exactly as it was intended to be when the European Convention on Human Rights was first agreed to.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
On these benches, we generally wish her well, because otherwise the country, in her own words, will start falling apart. So it's a good effort, 7 out of 10. She clearly has strong conservative instincts. But does she fear that such is the misery in many of these countries that they're not really worried about how long they have to wait for their asylum claim to be processed? And does she fear that unless we do arrest and detain and deport people very quickly, then this problem will just go on and on and on? So she mentioned return hubs. Could you say a bit more about that? And could you have an open mind about schemes such as Rwanda?
On Rwanda, no. I think on the substance of what he says, he can't be right, because claims are down in Europe and up here. What I would say to him instead is I hope that he will approach the debate that we're having with an open mind, ditch the failed policies of his party, and maybe consider more workable solutions from this side of the House instead.
Lewis Atkinson.
To continue the UK's proud history of offering sanctuary while simultaneously reducing illegal channel crossings, the right way for refugees fleeing persecution should be through safe and legal routes that are subject to full security checks and controls, not by paying people smuggling gangs to cross the channel in an uncontrolled and unsafe way. So can I therefore welcome the Home Secretary's announcement that such routes will be created? And can she tell the House how quickly she envisages these will be implemented?
I thank my honourable friend. Safe and legal routes are absolutely the way that we should be seeking to bring people into our country, and not through the people smuggling route in the north of France and over the Channel. And it is an explicit policy choice that I have made to disincentivise people coming through that route and paying thousands of pounds as they do so to organised immigration criminals, and will privilege those who come through our safe and legal routes. As we get order and control into the system that we have inherited, these safe and legal routes will become more generous over time. They will start modest, the numbers will be in the low hundreds, but they will grow, and we want them to grow because we want people fleeing sanctuary to be able to find safe harbour here in this country. And we make we are absolutely proud of that position as a government. This route will grow over time. I hope people across the House will support that, but I think we have to get order and control into our system first.
Christine Jodin. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think there would be general agreement that we have chaos in the immigration and asylum system, and that the government should be looking for new ways to discourage people from crossing the Channel in small boats. But in what she says today, is there a danger that those people that we do actually need to come to this country legally, with the skills that we need to fill the employment gap, to keep our NHS working and to work in the social care sector, will actually look at this country now and say, no, I don't want to go there, and that there is a danger in this policy that that will happen?
I disagree with the honourable lady. There is no reason to believe that. What I would say to her is that if you look at the numbers of people that come into this country on the small boats, it's about 40% of all asylum claims. Actually, it's about the same number of people who come through a legal route, a visit visa, a work visa or a study visa, which when that visa comes to an end, apply for asylum. I hope she would recognise that it is important that we stop that abuse of the asylum system so that we can retain public confidence in the legal migration system that I think we can all agree that this country needs.
Chris Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I now draw your attention to my declaration of interest. Over the last few years, 3 times as many people fleeing war or persecution have come to this country from Ukraine and Hong Kong as have come in small boats. But there has been no public outcry. The lesson here is the British people are compassionate and generous to refugees when the system is controlled, fair and gripped by the government. In 15 years working on asylum issues before being elected, I saw the dysfunction this government has inherited. There is nothing progressive about ducking asylum reform and allowing public support for refugees to drain away. Can the Home Secretary set out how these reforms will address the manifest unfairnesses and rebuild public support for the asylum system and immigration overall?
My honourable friend makes a very powerful point. This country is an open, tolerant and generous place, but there are conditions for that openness, for that tolerance and for that generosity, and they are that there is order and control in the system. And when people can see a system that is not working, where rules are being abused and not enforced, they do rightly feel angry, and it is important that this government deals with those problems so that we can have public consent for not just a new system that works better, but also for the safe and legal routes that I know he and others in this House will want to see. The 2 principles that underpin all of the reforms that I am making today are fairness and contribution. They are quintessential Labour values, but they are also quintessential British values too.
Sir Desmond Swing.
As she struggles to find these hubs, she should reflect on the fact that it was her government that wasted the 700 million by giving up the opportunity to Germany and the United States before we got the chance to use it.
Apologies, Madam Deputy Speaker. In all the finger wagging, I sort of missed the question. But I think it was something about Rwanda, which I think we can all agree was a totally failed scheme and a waste of money. There are good ongoing negotiations going in relation to return hubs. I very much hope we can update the House in due course.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I hope that we could all agree that a strong immigration system doesn't have to be a cruel one. When the Tories painted over murals for refugee children, the numbers of small boat crossings still went up. When they threatened deportations to Rwanda, guess what? The crossings still went up. So what evidence does the Secretary of State have that taking personal belongings, such as jewellery from refugees, and selling it off actually works as a deterrent? Isn't a focus on the new plans outlined on the safe and legal routes a much better use of all of our time?
I say to my honourable friend, we are not taking jewellery at the border. I can't say it any more clearly than that. She will know that the example I have used in my speech, and the sort of case we're going after, is those who have assets, those who have access to money and who can afford quite expensive cars, who should make a contribution to the cost of what is currently free asylum support. These two things are not the same, and I would urge her not to conflate the two. We will not and never will seize people's jewellery at the border. We're not going after their sentimental items like wedding rings and so on. We are talking about those who have high value assets, who receive at the moment, having claimed asylum in this country, so before they've been granted refugee status, they've claimed asylum, they receive free accommodation on the state. If they have assets, they should contribute to the cost of that accommodation, just as I explained in the example I used in my speech. That is the sort of case we are talking about, and I do hope that she will not perpetuate what is being said about jewellery, because I have ruled that out clearly in this House today.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Home Secretary for her statement? Labour's change, of course, is most welcome, and she's outlined some useful steps today. Now, my constituents want to see the Holiday Inn in Bridgewater emptied of migrants and returned to commercial use. And to achieve that, the Home Secretary is going to have to be bolder. So does she agree with me that anyone who arrives in this country illegally should be detained on entry and deported automatically?
Again, forgive me, but I'm not going to take any lessons from the party that gave us hotel use in the first place, now lecturing me about hotel exit. It is a manifesto commitment of this government that we will get out of hotels by the end of this Parliament. I hope to do so before then. That is why we are exploring large sites, including military sites. I know that will engage more debate in this House over the coming weeks and months, and I look forward to that. But given that he's a member of a party that started hotel use, I hope he'll reflect on that first.
Daniel Zeigner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I support my right honourable friend's statement, and particularly her announcement about safe and legal routes. She'll know that cities like Cambridge have a long tradition going back to kinder transport, to welcoming people from Syria and Ukraine. And I very much hope she'll work closely with authorities like Cambridge City Council to work on measures that can make these routes work.
I thank my honourable friend. We absolutely will work with local partners, councils, philanthropists, other charitable organisations as we develop these safe and legal routes. And as I said in my speech earlier, they will take three primary forms: community sponsorship, because we believe that is the best model for achieving integration of refugees into our communities, a route for talented students and for skilled workers as well. We want to play our full part as a country in providing sanctuary to those truly in need. We need to move to a better system. Safe and legal routes will be the way in the future to do it.
Marie Goldman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm sure we can all agree across this House that one of the key aspects of dealing with the asylum system is dealing with the crisis and the backlog, which is absolutely enormous. And the Home Secretary said in her speech that they are looking at a number of large military sites as an alternative to the asylum hotels. One of those large military sites that's already in use is RAF Wethersfield in Essex. I understand from Essex Police that Braintree District Council has been given a sum of funding to the tune of about £2 million to help with community cohesion, dealing with the fact that they have that facility nearby. However, buses are taking asylum seekers from Wethersfield to places like Colchester and to my constituency of Chelmsford several times a day, and that is placing extra strain on Essex Police in those areas, yet they are unable to access those funds. Will the Home Secretary commit to providing extra funds to Essex Police in those areas to help them police them?
I think that was two questions. One on the backlog, which I recognise the backlog of appeals is far too high. It is why we're going to create a new independent appeals system so that we can run through these cases more quickly whilst fulfilling our obligations to an independent process and providing early legal advice as well. And on the specific points in relation to Wethersfield and pressures on councils, we do of course work closely with local councils and do provide funding to assist with community cohesion and other issues, and I will look carefully at the example that she has raised if she writes to me.
Derek Twigg.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I say to the Home Secretary that her statement is most welcome. It's certainly a step in the right direction, and certainly the proposals that she set out today are a significant step in the right direction. It's also the case, I think, as well, that the comments she made about the damage to the social fabric of this country are very, very important. But can I ask her a specific question, and that is about asylum seekers who committed crimes and actually are deported, but then allowed to again put a second application in to come back to this country. Will she be looking at the law to see how that can be addressed?
What I would say to him on those who are convicted of crimes, the combination of the sentencing bill changes and what I have said today should actually lead to earlier deportation of foreign national offenders in this country. It is, of course, absolutely important that those individuals face the full force of the law, but we have made a policy decision as a government that for the vast majority of foreign national offenders, the appropriate thing to do is to move to immediate deportation wherever possible.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary said that she was exploring the possibility of return hubs with negotiations ongoing. Can she tell the House which country she's negotiating with and how much is it going to cost?
No, because he would not expect me, I think, to comment on live negotiations with other countries. But those negotiations are ongoing, and I hope we have announcements to make soon.
Catherine West.
Deputy Speaker, the Hornsey and Friar Barnet constituency has a long tradition of being boroughs of sanctuary, and just today I had an excellent briefing from the Jewish Voice for Refugees Hayas J-Corps. Will she agree with me that currently there is a real problem with the cliff edge for failed asylum seekers who end up street homeless or rough sleeping, particularly in my constituency around the Finsbury Park area? And will she redouble her efforts to understand the connections between homelessness and the asylum process so that all people can have shelter in the current period as we go into the winter?
I thank my honourable friend. I do understand the point that she is making. I mean, I think the reality is that there are a lot of failed asylum seekers within the asylum accommodation system, and I'm sure she would accept and agree that where somebody has a failed claim and no right to be in this country, the best thing to do is to voluntarily leave the country, and we do already provide packages to help people make that decision. I, of course, don't want to see people homeless in this country, but I know she can't possibly think that the answer to that is to essentially have there be no consequence to having a failed asylum claim in the first place. We do need to run a system where the rules are enforced, as uncomfortable as that might occasionally be, but of course recognising that we don't want people in destitution. That is why we do make financial packages available for people to voluntarily remove the country, and that will always be the case.
Pete Wishart.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in their manifesto, Labour promised to defend migrants' rights and build an immigration system based on compassion and dignity. Instead, what we have is a policy that's welcomed by Reform UK and that's even found favour with Tommy Robinson. From throwing refugees into destitution, to denying any meaningful route to citizenship, to forcible evictions, where exactly is the compassion and dignity in that?
Yeah.
Well, I can assure him that given that Tommy Robinson doesn't even think I'm actually English, he will certainly not be supporting anything I've got to say. So let's just leave that there, I think, Madam Deputy Speaker. We don't need to hear any more about what vile racists have to say about anything whatsoever. And let me also say to him, I guess it's not a surprise to me to find a Scottish National Party Member of Parliament defending a broken status quo. That's what they do in Scotland with the Scottish Government under the SNP every day, and that's what he's doing now. I hope he can agree that good reform, much needed reform to a broken system is the best way to retain public support for having an asylum system at all.
Leon Wara.
Deputy Speaker. And my right honourable friend is absolutely right to seek to bring order to the chaos at our borders, chaos instituted by the Tories, which undermines trust in our state and imposes such costs on communities. She is also right to address the pull factors which lure migrants to their death in our channel of claims of cushy lives in five-star hotels. And she is right to insist that our proposals must reflect British values and work in practice. So on that, could she say a little bit more about how reviewing refugee status every 2 years will work in practice, particularly with regard to the Home Office capacity and also with regard to integration?
I thank my honourable friend for her comments as well as her question. What we are doing in relation to the refugee status is moving from a situation where it's effectively permanent and the most attractive of all routes into the country to a more temporary status. I will make sure that the administration and the funding is available to run the new system as it is being designed. But I do say to her that is why we are also creating the protection, work and study route, because we believe that the best integration outcomes come when people are in work and able to contribute, and that is how we will retain popular support for having an asylum system. So people will transfer, we hope, into the protection, work and study route. But of course, if they do not, under the core protection model, they will still receive sanctuary from this country. It will be more regularly reviewed. I hope we can all agree that where a country is safe for an individual to return to, a return should, in the normal run of things, take place. But of course, if people have switched into a work route and are making a contribution, we will set out plans in the coming days about how they could earn their way to an earlier settlement, longer than what is available to people today, and still longer than what will be available to people on safe and legal routes, but shorter than those who remain on the core protection model.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Most on the benches opposite disagree with us, but I share the Home Secretary's admiration for the Danish model, and the Danish Finance Ministry publishes data regularly on the fiscal contribution of different profiles of migrants. This shows in Denmark that migrants from MENAT, the Middle East, North Africa, Pakistan and Turkey are net recipients over the course of their lifetimes. Will the Home Secretary ensure that the Treasury publishes the same data in the same way in this country?
Well, we keep all statistics under review, as he knows, and as was the case, I believe, when he was an advisor to a former Home Secretary. And let me say to him that the principle that underpins all of these reforms is about fairness and contribution. We believe most people want to be able to contribute to this country because the refugees themselves recognise that is the best way for them to have stability and security in their lives, and it is what is needed for the wider community as well. And we think that all refugees, if they're on the protection, work and study route, will have that opportunity. I'm not interested in models that start separating out different nations from one another. Once somebody has got status in our country, they are on a path to becoming one of us if they are working and contributing.
Gary McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I agree with the need for a fairer asylum system in which the public can have confidence. But all that she proposes today is predicated on there being decent legal advice available for people. And I know from 20 years as an MP that is simply not the case. Despite the best efforts of the advice sector in Bristol, which is proud to be a city of sanctuary, there's just a real dearth of decent immigration lawyers. And I see too many constituents that fall into the hands of dodgy lawyers who will help them falsify and fabricate claims. What is she going to do to ensure that decent legal advice is there?
Well, look, I agree with her in that my own constituency experience as a Member of Parliament is many people have turned up at my advice surgery believing that there are things that I can do as a constituency MP to assist them in their migration claim, which I cannot do, and they have been completely misled and robbed, frankly, by unscrupulous individuals. In the new appeal system that we are going to set up, early legal advice will be available from the start. We believe in access to justice. People need to have the right legal advice, but doing it early and right at the start of claims means that we can run a system where you can have one claim and one appeal rather than the absolute merry-go-round and whack-a-mole of claims that we see today.
Danny Kruger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the rhetoric that the Home Secretary has announced. In fact, I recognise the rhetoric of the Home Secretary today. We have our plan for restoring justice. She has announced a plan to restore order and control. But before she puts in her application to join Reform UK, and I very much welcome her doing so, can I just draw out the difference? Can I draw out the difference between our parties? Unlike the government, Madam Deputy Speaker, we don't propose to give illegal immigrants the right to stay here for 2.5 years after arriving. We don't propose to give them the right to study and work here. We don't propose to allow them to bring their families here. And crucially, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're not going to contort our law to comply with, or to fit into the European Convention on Human Rights. The derogations that she announces will not work to stop the lawfare, just as the derogations announced in the Rwanda bill wouldn't have stopped the lawfare, which is why I opposed that bill as well. So she talks about, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm great.
I don't think there was a question in there, Madam Deputy Speaker. As for his invitation to join his party, of whom there appear to be hardly any over there, let me tell him, over my dead body.
Ian Byrne. Thank you very much indeed. I want to commend the Home Secretary for getting the balance absolutely right. And I think the announcement that she has made today will be widely welcomed across our diverse community in Birmingham, because we know that our generosity of spirit is upheld by our rule of law, and the kindness that we show is protected by the justice that we share. So will she confirm that while we will always give sanctuary to those who need our protection, what she's advancing today is in effect a form of earned citizenship, and only those who step up to the full responsibilities of citizenship will enjoy the full rights of citizenship of this country?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very powerful point. We are constituency neighbours, and both of us have done many community meetings over the years where these issues have been discussed, not just by those who are white, but those who are ethnic minority Britons as well. Because the thing that unites all Britons, regardless of their background, is a desire for fairness and for a good system that people can have confidence in. And he's absolutely right. The concept of earned citizenship, earned settlement, contribution, fairness. As I said earlier, these are quintessential Labour values. They are quintessential British values as well, and that is why I know this plan will have support from across the country.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, these steps are definitely a move in the right direction. I'm pleased that the Home Secretary has rejected the proposal from the Liberal Democrats to allow those who arrive in the UK illegally to work. I think that would be a ludicrous magnet in favour of attracting more illegal migrants to the UK. The Home Secretary will be aware that the vast majority of removals from the country are voluntary rather than enforced. So what is she planning to do to ramp up enforced removals from the UK? And with respect to visa sanctions, why did the government vote against them as part of the border security bill?
I would just say gently to the honourable gentleman, a voluntary removal is the outcome that actually we should be aiming for. Enforced removals cost more money, are more likely to actually result in a failed removal, especially if there is such disruption that the pilot in charge of the plane says that they won't take that individual, costing often much more money to the British taxpayer. So it is value for money actually to have voluntary removals wherever possible, but we will pursue all types of removals, voluntary as well as enforced, and deportations of foreign national offenders as well. And this is our track record in the last 18 months to have got those numbers up by 23% to a number of just over 48,000, doing better than the last 18 months of the Conservative government. And all I would say to him on the issue of visa sanctions, these were powers they acquired but did not use.
Gill. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I commend my right honourable friend for the measures that she's introduced to tackle abuse of our asylum system and clamp down on those who are taking advantage of this country's generosity. The government's already closed 200 hotels since coming to power, but can the Home Secretary confirm that her department are actually expediting the measures that she has announced today so we can restore public confidence?
I thank my honourable friend and also constituency neighbour for her question. I can assure her we are moving at pace on the exit of hotels. We've already made good progress, closing a number of hotels down from the peak that we inherited to just under 200 today. We will go further and faster on that, and it is why we are looking at large sites, including military sites, and there will be more announcements on that in due course. And on these wider proposals, some of these proposals require consultation, others others require legislation. I know that they were debated with real vigour in this House, but we will aim to pass these measures as quickly as possible, because I agree with her, we need to quickly transition to a better system that we can all have more confidence in, and introduce the safe and legal routes that are the viable alternative, the right alternative, and persuade people not to get on a dangerous boat in the north of France instead.
Josh Babber
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Home Secretary has spoken a lot about contribution, but one of the most powerful forms of contribution to our country is getting a job and paying taxes, something that the Home Secretary will not allow people seeking asylum to do, despite the fact that in Denmark they can do that. She speaks about pull factors being an aversion to this, but a study by the University of Warwick, looking at 30 different studies of this, found that there was no long-term correlation between labour market access and destination choice. So will she review her decision not to offer people seeking asylum the right to work so that they can pay their own way in our country?
I think, look, what I would say to the honourable gentleman is what I said in response to a question from his side earlier today. It would be a pull factor, because we already know that the ability to work in this country illegally is already a pull factor, and that is why we are clamping down on illegal working. It's why we've seen 11,000 raids, 8,000 arrests, and 1,000 people with no right to be in this country removed from this country. So it would be a pull factor. And what I would say to him also is, I have the misfortune of having to look through the TikTok accounts and the various other ways in which the organised immigration criminals actually advertise their packages for people to get on a boat in the Channel in the north of France. It's in all of those marketing materials as well, and we know from the intelligence that we gather as well, that is one of the pull factors. It's why we have to deal with it.
Gurinder Singh Josan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for her statement, which I fully support. My constituency, like that of the Home Secretary, is incredibly diverse, with people originating in countries across the world, settled and contributing to our communities. One thing that people of all backgrounds detest, that they have in common, is that they absolutely detest the unfairness that the party opposite allowed to creep into asylum and immigration system. They also detest the demonising of their neighbours by people in reform. So does the Home Secretary agree with me that the choice is clear? A choice between chaos handed over by the party opposite of a system taken advantage of by those who can pay the people smugglers, or a system of fair and safe legal routes for those who need them.
Home Secretary.
Thank my honourable friend. My own parents were migrants to this country in the late 60s and 70s. Migration is woven into the story of my own family and that of thousands of people that I represent in my constituency of Birmingham, Ladywood. And let me say to him, I agree, ethnic minority Brits are just like every other kind of Brit. We value fairness and contribution as well. That is why those principles sit underneath all of the policy announcements that I've made today.
Carla Denyer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it isn't people seeking sanctuary that are tearing our country apart. It's toxic, racist narratives and the scapegoating of migrants and asylum seekers for what is nothing to do with them. The chronic housing crisis, the running down of public services are not caused by migrants. They are caused by political decisions and by the grotesque inequality in this country. Does the Secretary of State understand that attempting to out-reform reform is actually just boosting this baseless far-right narrative and will only deepen divisions when we urgently need leadership and hope instead?
Let me tell her, I couldn't care less what any other political party has to say about these matters. I don't care what other politicians are saying on the television. I don't care what other activists are saying either. I care about the fact that I have an important job to do and I can see that there is a problem here that needs to be fixed. If it was possible to pretend there wasn't a problem because there wasn't one, I wouldn't be saying there is one. There is a genuine problem in this asylum system and we need someone to sort it out, not to pretend it doesn't exist, which I'm afraid is one of the things that fuels the division in the first place. My own constituents, since I have been Home Secretary, have been telling me directly of abuses in the visa system that they can see with the evidence of their own lies long before any officials in Whitehall have ever clocked onto those things. It is a moral responsibility when you see something broken to fix it and to make sure that the fact that it's broken is not fueling division in our country. And let me also say to her, it is Green Party politicians who are absolute hypocrites because they talk great language in here and then oppose asylum accommodation in their own constituencies.
Speaker. Can I first thank the Home Secretary for her statement? As a member of Bradford West, my constituency, I'm really proud of Bradford being a city of sanctuary. And the Home Secretary is aware I'm also a former foster parent to an Afghan refugee. My concern is that had somebody like my Afghan refugee, my foster son, come to this country and not had a parent and just had a sibling, with the reforming of Article 8 that the Home Secretary is suggesting, he would not be able to apply for just his only sibling to come over. And that would also apply to potentially a Ukrainian woman if we were to look at contributions who had young children, came to this country and couldn't contribute because of a trauma or she experienced. So will the Home Secretary meet with me when she's doing her consultation around the safe passage for refugees and asylum seekers?
Home Secretary.
Well, of course, I will always happily meet with my honourable friend. We made clear in the asylum policy statement that the routes for these measures do not apply to unaccompanied children and other vulnerable groups. We will be setting out our specific policies in relation to vulnerable groups, including unaccompanied children, separately. So these measures do not apply to them. She will know that the scheme for Ukrainians is a bespoke temporary scheme brought in by the party opposite when they were in government and supported not just by our party but across this House. So I would expect the rules of that scheme to apply in the normal way, but I will of course discuss with her the issues that she raises.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Can I thank the Home Secretary for a copy of her speech? And in it says, the public rightly expect we can determine who enters this country and who must leave. And I agree. One thing that's missing, though, is verifying the people who come in. This side put forward the idea of age verification that many other countries have. Is that part of her plan? Would she consider putting it back in the plan so we know exactly who is coming in, that they are who they say they are?
Home Secretary.
Well, if he reads the asylum policy statement, he'll know that on age verification we are pursuing AI as a more effective and workable model, unlike that suggested by the party opposite, which was all about MRI scans and bones. We believe we have a much more effective way of ensuring age verification is available and that the methodology for it actually works.
Sarah Russell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you to the Home Secretary for her statement. There is currently a loophole within employment law in the UK that it means that people who are self-employed are not subject to right-to-work checks. And that means that many people work illegally within the gig economy with no potential risk to their non-employer. Will the Home Secretary discuss how we can close that loophole while simultaneously ensuring that we do uphold rights for British workers, but also the rule of law and the remainder of our rights within the UK?
Home Secretary.
I really thank my honourable friend for her question. We are closing that loophole in the Borders Bill. It is important that colleagues support us when that is debated again on Wednesday. She's absolutely right that closing down these loopholes, ensuring that everyone is subject to a right to work check and therefore build support for a rule of law approach to the way that people are able to access employment in this country is incredibly important, and I hope that all colleagues, even those across the House, might see it to support these measures later this week.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Nowhere in the Home Secretary's statement does she put this into any kind of global context about the millions of people that have become refugees or homeless all around the world, and that more than two-thirds of those are housed by the southern countries, the poorest countries in the world, with the least resources possible to do it. And what she's doing instead is putting in draconian measures against refugees trying to come to this country, failing to recognise that more than 6,000, for example, of those that crossed the Channel this year come from Afghanistan, a war-torn country that we helped to make into a war-torn country. And she instead is trying to appease the most ghastly right-wing racist forces all across Europe in undermining and walking away from the European Convention on Human Rights, a convention created by the post-war Labour government. Does she not recognise history is going to be a harsh judge on this government for undermining the whole global humanitarian principles behind the ECHR and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights?
Home Secretary.
Well, not for the first time. I'm a little mystified as to what the honourable gentleman is talking about. He starts with the global context. I guess my start point is different to his because I start with our domestic context first. He ought to know that in this country there have already been bespoke schemes for the resettlement of people from Afghanistan. So perhaps he could, read up on those schemes. He should also have heard from what I said in my statement that we remain absolutely committed to offering sanctuary to those who are fleeing conflict abroad. We think that the best way to do that is not to encourage people to get on a boat in the Channel by paying thousands and thousands of pounds to people smugglers, who, by the way, it's not just smuggling that's a vile crime. Those individuals are involved in all sorts of other disgusting organised crime. They should not be in receipt of money from vulnerable people. I want to disincentivise people making that choice, and I want to incentivise people coming on safe and legal routes instead. And if he would actually read the asylum policy statement, he would know it's the policy position of this government to provide more safe and legal routes. Once he's done more reading, I'll be happy to answer more of his questions.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do remember when the Prime Minister pledged an immigration system based upon compassion and dignity. Yet now, and it needs to be said, we've got an immigration minister tweeting deport, deport, deport. And now this policy announcement, which I'm afraid scrapes the bottom of the barrel. If we're being frank, isn't this just a desperate attempt to triangulate with reform? And like some of the other terrible policy errors that have been made in recent months, isn't it not only morally wrong, but another policy which is set to push away Labour voters? Why not recognise that now than in a few months and make a U-turn?
Home Secretary.
I would really caution my honourable friend not to defend a broken status quo. He should also know that it is foreign national offenders that are deported from this country, and I would hope he could agree that foreign national offenders should be deported from this country. We should not be keeping convicted criminals in our nation a day longer than is absolutely necessary. And I just say to him, the thing that's morally wrong is knowing that you have a broken system and then pretending either that it's not broken or defending a broken status quo. I will never tolerate that. And I have to say to him, as I've said to other members opposite today as well, I do not care for what other parties are saying on these matters or what other politicians have to say either. I have thought first and foremost of my moral responsibility to the people of this country as I fulfil my duty as Home Secretary. I have a series of reforms here that are underpinned by the values of the Labour Party and the values of the British people. They are fairness and they are contribution. I hope he will reflect on that as he reads up on the detail of these reforms.
Ben Oxojecti.
Mr. Speaker, in February, during the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill, I raised the issue of the generous financial and accommodation package advertised on the government's own website, Asylum Support What You'll Get, which outlines the provision of an Aspen card with £49.18 of cash loaded onto it each week, on top of free accommodation, even if you've been refused asylum. Cards that are able to be used for gambling and have been over 6,000 times, according to an FOI. In May, I raised it again when I asked the previous Home Secretary what she planned to do to address the pull factor of this free cash and free home. So can this Home Secretary now commit to my previous calls that these pull factors must be mitigated to be a deterrent, and will those on Section 4 or Section 95 support have the benefit withdrawn under these measures?
Home Secretary.
Well, I would urge him to look at the detail of the asylum policy statement, the whole point of which is to deal with the pull factors that we know are drawing people to get on a dangerous boat and cross the Channel illegally. The upshot of the reforms is to deal with those pull factors, and you will know that within the asylum policy statement we have said that it is a relatively small number, it's just under 10%, but just under 10% of those in asylum accommodation already do have the right to work, and in future we will expect them, where they have the right to work, to work.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary is arguing that what will heal this divided nation is to get somebody who we have agreed is a refugee with a well-founded fear of persecution to feel a permanent sense of limbo, because they will never be able to plan for the long term for them
or their family, because their status will always be uncertain because they could still face deportation. Her consultation document, which I have read, talks about using enforced return for families. Last year alone, 10,000 children, many of whom are with their families, were granted refugee status in this country. I know she plans to consult, but given this does involve children, can she be clear with us whether she intends to incarcerate children with their families as part of enforced return, or whether she intends to separate children from their mums and dads as part of this policy, and how we will continue to uphold the UN Rights to the Child Convention returns of education?
Home Secretary.
Well, I would encourage my honourable friend to look at the detail of the asylum policy statement on our intentions in relation to the protection, work and study route, which in future will be the route by which refugees can contribute and earn their way to settlement in this country. And of course, it is the express intention of this policy statement to disincentivise people coming through dangerous channel crossings and to incentivise and to push people towards what will, over time, become more generous, safe and legal routes of entry into this country with more privileged status when it comes to the earning of permanent settlement. Let me say to her on failed asylum-seeking families, because I think that is the important context that was missing from her question. There are 700 Albanian families at the moment who have made asylum claims. Those asylum claims have failed, and the only reason they've not been removed from the country is because of the policies around not removing families, that is to say parents with their children. We are not going to separate parents and their children, but we are going to consult on the removal of support and how we effectively and safely ensure that those individuals are returned. But we will of course want to see most of those people return voluntarily instead.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Stoking fear and division through the kind of performative cruelty trailed over the media this weekend has consequences. We saw that in Caerphilly last month, where Reform UK spread information. Ukrainians spoke of intimidation. So when she speaks of unity, surely the lesson from Caerphilly is that imitating Reform doesn't create unity, doesn't win trust, but standing firm on values does.
Here, here.
I'm sorry, that's just unserious from the Honourable Lady. I'm sorry to find that the Reform Party is living rent-free in so many people's heads. I can assure you it's living nowhere near mine. These policy proposals are designed to fix what we all know to be true, which is we have a broken system. It is driving division across our country. I see that in my own constituency. I hope she's not suggesting that the evidence of my own eyes and my own experience in my own constituency, where over 70% of those people are not white and most of them have a migration story just like my own. These are matters of great interest across our country, across every type of community in our country, and it is incumbent on any government that wants to make sure that we can run a decent system and not fuel division in our country to pursue the sorts of reforms that we are talking about today, underpinned by what I would have hoped were values that her party could have signed up to as well, and that is to say fairness and contribution.
Lauren Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank and support the Home Secretary for her statement today. This is long overdue reform of the system, such as reforming safe and legal routes, cracking down on illegal working, and also against those abusing the asylum seeking and immigration system, yet maintains support for those that need our support, such as those fleeing war in Ukraine and others that come here legally. It is about fairness. Can the Home Secretary detail when these reforms will be in place so that residents can see the outcomes of these actions?
Thank my honourable friend for her question. We will pursue the consultation, the measures that require consultation as quickly as possible, and there will be legislation in the coming months and certainly in the second session, which we will seek to offer, obviously subject to the agreement of the House, pass as quickly as possible.
Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary's asylum plans still have a gaping hole in the middle of them, in that she doesn't know what to do with failed asylum seekers who can't be returned home. Her statement today says that she's exploring possibilities with third countries. Can I suggest she swallows her pride and speaks to a third country we know is willing, Rwanda?
Home Secretary.
Look, I do say to members opposite, they are going to have to ditch their addiction to Rwanda. It didn't work, and nobody in the country supported it. We are, as he well knows, and as members opposite well know, when you are negotiating with other countries about possible agreements, the one thing you do not do is publicise them before an agreement is reached.
Rebecca Long-Bailey.
The Home Secretary is aware that in absence of safe legal routes, the law forces the situation where a refugee has to set foot on UK soil to seek asylum, which has led to dangerous journeys and no checks or vetting taking place. Now, the Secretary's referenced sponsorship as the primary safe route. Could she clarify whether this is capable of being applied for from outside the UK? And what consideration has she made of recommendations by Safe Passage to implement a visa refugee scheme so that applications can be done from outside the UK, cases assessed, vetted and decided upon before a refugee embarks on a dangerous journey here?
Home Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. The whole purpose of the new safe and legal routes is that those individuals are accepted as refugees before they enter into the United Kingdom. The point of that being is that they never then pay thousands of pounds to illegal smugglers along any sort of route that they might travel on. So it is in fact exactly as she says, you want to accept people as refugees before they set foot on UK soil, and then once they are here on that safe and legal route, they will access permanent settlement more quickly than any other route in this country. And it is a good thing that the government is seeking to incentivise people to come through safe and legal routes and not pay thousands and thousands of pounds to criminals along the way.
Dr. Andrew Mirison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was a genuinely good statement as far as it went, from which we learnt that countries could be determined to be safe at some point in the future and refugees from them returned home. Can the Home Secretary say what her criteria for safety would be? Which countries does she have in her sights? Would it, for example, include a Council of Europe and NATO member, ECHR signatory and EU candidate Turkey?
Home Secretary.
Look, I'm not going to provide a running commentary on countries. He will know that, of course, I referenced Syria specifically in my speech earlier to the House. That is because the basis on which many thousands of Syrians were making the claims related to the regime that was in place before, during the conflict, which has now fallen, and there is a new regime. We have already made a small number of voluntary returns to Syria. Other countries are exploring enforced returns to Syria, given the change in circumstances there. We will, of course, look at the same as well. We will, in the normal run of things, when it comes to considering whether a country is safe for a person or not, keep those matters under review, as I know he would expect us to do.
Olivia Blake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yes, we have a broken system, but does the Home Secretary really believe that having to flee violence, war and persecution means you have won a golden ticket if you are lucky enough to get refugee status here? Does she understand that such rhetoric is deeply offensive and feeds division? Does she accept shutting down routes for settlement will damage integration in our communities and will only strengthen reform, not beat them? And wouldn't a better way of measuring contribution be allowing people to work and pay taxes?
Secretary.
Well, I would gently point out to her that we have a large number of failed asylum seekers, that is to say people whose claims have not succeeded and who do not have the right to be in this country still here, despite their home country being safe. Many of the people who claim asylum in this country have passed through multiple safe countries across Europe before they end up in the north of France. And we've seen claims go down in Europe and increase here in the UK. And I would just encourage her to remember that we are opening safe and legal routes. The whole point of these reforms is to disincentivise the journeys that lead to criminals earning a lot of money and people being in the north of France, and to move to a system where we have safe legal routes. We've accepted people as refugees before they set foot on UK soil, so that when they come here they can earn and contribute and be fully integrated through models like community sponsorship, which we know work.
Martin Wrigley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank the Home Secretary for sharing her experiences earlier and thoroughly condemn that sort of behaviour she described against her. It's unacceptable in any case. The Secretary of State has described rapid decisions on appeals. Does she also believe, as I do, that rapid decision-making on the initial application of asylum seekers should be promoted and highlighted? And would she consider putting a timed target, a timescale target, for decision in a matter of weeks and not years in place with her department? And her remarks on Ukrainian guests over the weekend. She described them going home when peace broke out. May I remind her that peace will not mean safety? Please can she assure the House that a more considered and considerate response may be found? And will she meet with me and Ukrainian guests to resolve that issue?
Well, let me just say to him on Ukraine, a point that I think was not understood fully by those that were questioning me at the weekend. It is a bespoke scheme created only for Ukrainians with its own rules. It's not subject to what we have set out in the asylum policy statement, because he will know, as is the position in relation to our discussions with the Ukrainian government, these individuals are welcome in our country so that we can keep them safe. They're not classed as refugees because they're here temporarily on that scheme. We will always uphold our obligations under that scheme. We supported it in opposition as well. He is right on the point about rapid decisions. It's important that decisions made at first instance, but also through an appeals process, are of high quality. That is one of the ways that we have to make sure that they don't get constantly appealed. But our current system means that even though we've made huge progress on decreasing the backlog on initial decisions, the appeals backlog has grown. And over time, as people sit in the appeals queue, more rights are accrued. And unlike any other type of legal order in this country, the order to leave this country being not complied with still allows people to accrue more rights in the interim. We do not run a good and effective appeal system at the moment. It's why we're going to create a new one, but I can assure him that at its heart will be early legal advice, truly independent adjudicators making the decisions, but doing so in a way that allows them to fast-track claims that have a low chance of success, make sure that the right decision is made quickly, one claim, one appeal, with a certain outcome at the end, not subject to years and years of a merry-go-round around the courts.
And before I call the next member, can I just ask, make a plea that we keep questions and answers concise? Luke Akerst.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I wholeheartedly welcome the measures which I believe will tackle a failure by the previous government to maintain one of the most basic fundamental functions of government, control of our borders. My constituents in North Durham are worried and they're angry about the proliferation of HMOs to house asylum seekers locally in towns and villages which already have significant social and economic problems. Will these measures lead to lower demand from the Home Office for this type of housing for asylum seekers and the return of these HMOs over time to use as family homes for local people who need affordable housing?
Home Secretary.
Well, I can say that the totality of the reforms we believe will lead to less pressure on accommodation. So I think the short answer to his question on HMOs is yes, but I do recognise the problems that he notes, because HMOs are a big problem in my own constituency too.
Lewis Cocking.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I really do thank the Home Secretary for her statement. Broadly, this is a tiny step in the right direction, but does not go far enough. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, to truly show the Home Secretary is listening to the British people, does she agree with me that if you enter this country illegally, you should never be allowed to stay?
We will always abide by our obligations under the Refugee Convention, and we do believe in offering sanctuary, but we make no apology for the fact that those who enter illegally by crossing through the Channel will have a longer path to settlement. We are deliberately incentivising other safe and legal routes into the country to show that that is the proper way to seek sanctuary in this country, not pay criminals a lot of money and put your own life at risk.
John MacDonald.
When we introduce new legislation and new procedures, it's important we can calculate the implications and where it could lead us to. Like my old friend for Vauxhall, I work with, and have done for decades, to be frank, with asylum families, and in particular the children. And what I find is the children are extremely traumatised. And what we try to do to them is give them security and peace of mind for the family. Now what will happen is every 13 months, that security could be undermined and they could face the removal. Could I ask my right honourable friend whether or not she's consulted the Children's Commissioner, or education psychologists or others about the implications of what she's saying today? And the other issue as well is that in the past she's mentioned forced removement of families. I just remind my colleagues, in the past that was happening and the families were often detained in Harmondsworth Detention Centre. I used to visit the children. That was one of the most distressing experiences I've had as an MP. Could she give me the assurance that no child will be placed in detention as a result of this policy change?
Secretary.
Well, let me tell him, firstly, there will be a full equality impact assessment for all of these measures in the usual way. And as the consultations take place and as the legislation is drafted and then debated in this House, I'm sure all of the individuals that he has said, has mentioned, will have their say. I would expect them to as well. I would just gently remind him that when we're talking about the asylum system today, we're not just talking about those who arrive illegally on small boats. We're also talking about people who arrive on visitor visas, on student visas and on work visas, who the minute those visas come to an end immediately claim asylum. We know that the relative generosity of that route, the effective automatic permanent settlement after 5 years, is one of the things that attracts that behaviour. It is right that we clamp down on that and disincentivise people trying to stay in this country in that way, and instead incentivise people who will come through safe and legal routes. As I say to him, as we get order and control in the system, the safe and legal routes will start relatively modest, but I do anticipate them growing more generous and growing over time, because this country is fundamentally open, tolerant and generous.
Sammy Wilson.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the honest and realistic assessment which the Secretary of State has made today in relation to the broken asylum system and also the division which immigration is causing across the United Kingdom. She has been innovative in some of the proposals which she has made, but only time will tell whether the potential loopholes will undermine the honourable objective which she has set, namely to cut back on illegal immigration. In my view, the only way of doing that is to make sure that people who enter this country breaking the law get returned immediately. But on the issue of the ECHR and its the expanded interpretation, can she give us an assurance that whatever changes she makes in that will apply fully to Northern Ireland, where unfortunately the previous government embedded the ECHR in the Windsor framework and has proven already to be a means of undermining immigration policy?
Secretary.
Well, I can assure him that the Minister for Immigration has met with his counterparts in the devolved administrations, and we will keep all of those conversations going, because this is a reserved matter rather than a devolved one. Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just say, in case the microphone did not pick up my answer to my honourable friend on the detention of children, I can give him that assurance that he sought in his question.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do urge caution. We're in this predicament because the very people who championed Brexit failed to warn of the consequences of leaving the Dublin Agreement. Since the EU has moved on and will introduce its asylum and migration management regulations next summer. Instead of creating insecurity, what discussions has the Home Secretary had with the EU as to how we can explore how we work with the regulations to protect our human rights and responsibilities through this progressive and pragmatic approach?
Madam Secretary.
Thank my honourable friend for her question. Countries across Europe are tightening up their rules, and it is important that we do not become or remain an outlier. And in fact, it is a regular complaint of many of our counterparts in Europe that at least 30% of those who travel across Europe are seeking ultimately to come here to the United Kingdom. It is something that has come up in all of the conversations I've had with multiple counterparts across Europe, and it is one of the reasons why we have to make sure that we can have a system that works and that we get our own house in order.
Lincoln Job.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A constituent wrote to me asking whether I could get a wriggle on with his EUSS application. We checked out with the Home Office, and it turns out that he was subject to a live deportation order. In fact, it was issued in 2017, and we did deport him. Somehow he got back into the country and made his application. I said to the Home Secretary's predecessor that if she was prepared to, with a stroke of her pen, reenact that deportation order, I was prepared to drive him to the airport myself. Now that we've got a Home Secretary that's going to get a grip of this situation, I offer the same thing again.
Secretary.
Well, I look forward to welcoming his application to join immigration enforcement. If he wants to write to me about that specific example, I will look into it. I know that the systems at the Home Office need a lot of tightening up. It is work that actually my predecessor started when she brought in a new permanent secretary into the department to make the necessary changes, and it is the work that I will continue.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I agree with my right honourable friend that this system is absolutely smashed to smithereens. It's smashed to smithereens because of 14 years of destruction from the benches opposite. But of course we all want to see the control of our borders. We want to stop the boats. We want to see better, safer, legal routes. But I appeal to my right honourable friends and honourable friends on the front bench. When the opposition parties, the Tories, Reform UK, not to mention that odious racist Chancellor, bankrolled by the world's wealthiest man, are championing our policies, is it not time to question whether we're actually in the right place?
I have a lot of time and high regard for my honourable friend, and what I would say to him is he shouldn't allow mischief making by those that he names to throw him or our party off course. I hope that he will have heard the support from our own backbenches today, from members of Parliament who can see that these are changes that are necessary to fix the very broken system that he agrees that we have. And I would just ask for people, please don't keep repeating the name of a man who doesn't even think I'm English. I find that very offensive, and I would just ask everyone to refrain from doing so. We don't need to do that, and we do not need to go there. Don't fall for the mischief that others are making here. We know there is a broken system. It is our solemn responsibility as a Labour Party and as a Labour government to get on with fixing it.
Charlotte Kane.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I agree the asylum system is broken, and I welcome the commitment to safe and legal routes for people to seek asylum. But there is much in this bill that I think is cruel, impractical and won't work. I pick out one example, is making people have reviews every 2.5 years for 20 years. Yeah. It's cruel because those people are not going to be able to get a sense of security and safety. It's counterproductive because those people are going to struggle to get good quality, secure, high-paid jobs and contribute to our society. And it won't work. We already know that the Home Office can't cope with what it's currently having to do. My casework is full of people whose papers, when they're trying for immigration status, their papers get lost. The digital right to work system doesn't work properly. We've got a backlog in the asylum claim. How are you going to make this work?
Secretary.
I'm making changes that I will ensure will work. Let me assure her of that. And secondly, what I would say to her is I make no apology for disincentivising routes into this country which basically make people smugglers very, very rich men and fuel other disgusting crimes across Europe and in this country as well. It is right that we reserve a privileged status for those who get into work and education, as refugees on core protection will be able to do, and also those who come via safe and legal routes. That should be the proper way that people come into this country. It has better integration outcomes as well.
Nadia Whittam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Earlier today, the Home Secretary advised that I wait for the detail of the reforms before criticising them. Well, now the detail's out, and I'm afraid it doesn't reassure me in the slightest. It's hard to know where to begin when so much of what has been announced flies in the face of decency and compassion, but I'll focus on family reunion. Limiting access to family reunion for refugees will force children and spouses into the hands of the very people smugglers that the Home Secretary is seeking to smash. It will push them into unsafe dinghies, risking their lives. Would she be comfortable with this?
Secretary.
Well, I would urge her to look at the proposals on protection, work and study, and also on safe and legal routes. It is right that we try to pivot to a more humane system that privileges those who come not via paying people smugglers a lot of money. And on family reunification, let me just say to her this. British citizens at the moment have to meet thresholds and various qualifying tests before they can apply for family reunion. I think it is right that we bring the position in relation to refugees through the protection, work and study route to the same level.
And before I call the next member, members will have seen how many people are on their feet, and I will be needing to finish this statement by 8 o'clock. So please bear that in mind if I want to get everybody in, which I do. Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome a sizable amount of what the Home Secretary has said today and is trying to do. Earlier this year, the Immigration Asylum Chamber of the Upper Tribunal, in the case of IX, reiterated the established administrative law requirements that government decision-making in asylum cases be proportionate and reasonable, and not expose individuals to prolonged or indefinite uncertainty, what the Home Office used to criticise under the Tories, in fact, as a lengthy limbo period. So can the Home Secretary clarify how her proposal to require a 20-year period before someone granted asylum may obtain a permanent right to remain complies with these fundamental principles?
Home Secretary.
I do believe it does comply with those principles. At the moment, at the end of the 5 years, there is already supposed to be a safe country review. We will bring that forward and we will make the safe country review a real thing. But as I've said to him and other members, we will also create alongside the core protection route, the protection work and study route as well, because we want to encourage people to make a contribution to this country.
Emma Foodie.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In a previous life, I was a 999 call taker with the ambulance service and had the awful experience of answering a call to a distraught family desperate for help. But I couldn't help them. I couldn't help them save their loved one. And why? Because they couldn't understand the life-saving instructions which I was trying to give them over the phone due to the language barrier. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that there is nothing progressive about defending a status quo where vulnerable people are unable to access emergency services due to an inability to speak our language?
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I endorse every word that she just said.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Common Travel Area allows movement across the UK, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. It's been reported in the Irish media that a UK Home Office official briefed the Irish Department of Justice last Thursday in regards to what the Home Secretary was bringing forward. Can I ask her, what's the Irish Government's response to her proposals?
Home Secretary.
I'm afraid I don't recognise the briefing that he refers to.
Clive Efford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can recall a predecessor of my right honourable friend who described the Home Office as not being fit for purpose, and I've never known a time when there wasn't a backlog of cases with the Home Office. And this set of proposals is going to require people's cases to be reviewed every 30 months. Is that a realistic aim? And is she clear that she can make the Home Office fit for the purpose she set out today?
Home Secretary.
Well, we're already supposed to do safe country reviews and we will ensure that they are done every 2.5 years. We will also ensure that wherever possible, refugees move into the protection, work and study route instead. And I just say to him, I recognise the phrase not fit for purpose. I've been very clear that I don't think the Home Office is fit for purpose yet. There is new management at the Home Office. They're getting on with making the changes that are necessary, and I will ensure it is both fit for purpose and able to enact the reforms that I've set out today.
Lara Sultana.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Sivan London warned, and I quote, "What Enoch Powell says today, the Conservatives say tomorrow, and Labour legislates the day after. Seizing valuables belonging to asylum seekers, making refugees wait 20 years before they can apply to settle permanently, and deporting entire families, including children, who have built new lives here because their country of origin is deemed safe. These measures are straight out of the fascist playbook." The Home Secretary has described herself as a child of immigrants, so I ask her, is she proud to introduce measures that punish and persecute desperate and vulnerable people seeking sanctuary? And how does it feel to kick away the ladder and be praised by fascist Tommy Robinson? And I must add, he has a...
Order, Home Secretary. Home Secretary. Order, order, Home Secretary.
I'm just going to clarify a point of fact. She said I described myself as a child of immigrants. It's not a description, it's just a statement of fact. And everything else she said is beneath contempt.
Madam Deputy Speaker, migrants make immeasurable contribution to our communities. In Manchester, Russian, Wendy, who has Jamaican heritage, is a community health champion. Najma from Somalia leads local initiatives to tackle knife crime. And Hafsa grew up in the Middle East and leads nature improvements projects. So does my right honourable friend agree that the language we use to talk about immigration must reflect the important role immigrants play in the functioning of our nation?
Home Secretary.
I absolutely agree about the contribution that migrants and refugees make to our country, and it is precisely the reason that I'm making these reforms, because I can see a broken system that is creating deep division across our country, and I think it is important we not only fix this system but make sure that we retain public consent for having an asylum system at all.
Jim Allister.
At an earlier point in this debate, the Home Secretary said that nothing matters more to her than holding our own country together. Does she therefore accept that to succeed, her reforms must operate equally across the whole United Kingdom, including her adjustments to Article 8 of the European Convention? And if so, how is that application to be secured in Northern Ireland, given the impeding effect of Article 2 of the Windsor Framework? How is that going to be achieved?
Secretary.
All of the measures in the asylum policy statement are compliant with the Windsor Framework.
Anna Begum.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Deporting families after they've resettled here because their country is deemed safe is simply wrong. Could the Home Secretary tell us how the government determines what a safe country is, and will she publish the criteria? And given that she mentioned the DRC earlier, is she really saying it is a safe country over there? And will she also publish all existing returns agreements so that members of this House and indeed the British public can properly scrutinise them? I have done the reading and it's not in the detail.
Home Secretary.
Well, we already do safe country reviews, so we would seek to continue that. They are publicly available in terms of our position on different countries, and in fact mostly pass through secondary legislation in this House. I make no apology for a system that will privilege in the future those who come to this country through a safe and legal route rather than those who pay people smugglers thousands of pounds and end up in the north of France instead. And the point on visa sanctions is related to the fact that many countries do not comply with us when we seek to return people lawfully to their own countries, and this is just one of the tools that we have at our disposal to have compliance with those countries so that they do take their own people back.
Iqbal Mahmood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the UK's historical and ongoing involvement in unlawful military interventions alongside allies such as the United States and Israel, how does the Home Secretary assess the correlation between these foreign policy actions and wars and the displacement of populations resulting in increased numbers of refugees and asylum seekers arriving in the UK? And what steps will her government make toward proactive peace-building initiatives and the restoration of overseas humanitarian aid, which could address the root causes of displacement and reduce the long-term pressures on our asylum system?
Secretary.
Well, the government always plays its full part in peace processes wherever we can. We put our shoulder to the wheel on the delicate and diplomatic efforts that are required to bring conflicts to an end. But that is not actually what is relevant for what we're discussing today. We have a broken system today. We have thousands of people stuck in the system today, and we have thousands of people coming on boats through the north of France through reasons that are nothing to do with the British government, but we still fulfil our international obligations, and we will do so going forward as well. But I make no apology for wanting to move to a system where we incentivise safe and legal routes instead.
Colette Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I agree with the Government that we desperately need to tackle the issue of illegal migration. I hear this at the doors and see it in my mail each week in Birmingham, Erdington. Can the Home Secretary tell us how, after these proposed changes come into force, how quickly will the Government ensure that safe legal routes are in place, because this will be the key to stopping the boats, and also How will the government deal with the issue of those that have claimed that they are minors, but they're clearly not? And that is another massive issue. Thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary.
I thank my honourable friend. We are moving to a system of age verification based on AI modelling, which we believe is effective in actually being able to verify someone's true age. So we are moving on that. And let me assure her, we will move to legislate on these, consult and then legislate on these measures as quickly as possible. I am seized of the need to move quickly to restore public confidence. And as we get order and control into the system, we will start opening up the safe and legal routes. They will be modest to begin with, but they will grow and be more generous over time as we restore order and control.
Sarah Perching.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Daresbury Asylum Hotel in Runcorn has been emptied thanks to my by-election campaign. But what assurances can the Secretary of State give my constituents of Runcorn and Helsby that the many HMOs in Runcorn will be emptied of illegal migrants and criminals under her government, and that they will be deported without delay, never to be allowed legal entry into the UK?
Well, it is this government that is exiting hotels and will do so. It's a manifesto commitment that we will do so by the end of the Parliament, and I intend to bring that forward as much as possible. And let me say to her, we will always fulfil our international obligations, but I make no mistake for wanting to privilege safe and legal routes rather than illegal entry into the country.
Samantha Niblett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Every single day I campaigned in South Derbyshire whilst a candidate and since becoming an MP last July. Immigration has been the #1 issue dividing my communities. They have either been pushed to apathy, and we're talking about Labour voters here, or they've been pushed towards reform. I cannot thank her enough for today's statement, because finally at last my constituents feel heard. But my question to her is, how frequently can they expect an update so that they can see that these promises being made today will result in delivery sooner rather than later?
Home Secretary.
Well, I thank her for her comments and her question. Let me assure her that I know that the way to build public confidence in the new system is not just to announce the reforms here, but to get on with legislating and then implementing those reforms so that her constituents, my constituents and people all across the country can see the impact and can see that we can fix this system and that the public confidence in having an asylum system at all can be retained.
Adnan Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Stripping people of the very few belongings they have left after fleeing war and persecution runs contrary to the very principle of asylum, a principle rooted in protection and compassion. So I ask the Home Secretary, how do such measures help address the real root causes of displacement and the refugee crisis, war, destabilisation, persecution and dangerous crossings?
Secretary.
Well, I shouldn't be surprised to see the honourable gentleman indulging in misinformation here. Let me tell him the example I used in my speech. As somebody who has access to £800 a month from their family, has enough money to acquire an Audi and is not expected to contribute to the cost of his asylum support at all. I think it is right that we change that. British citizens have to have give account of the assets they have before they access benefit support. I don't think that these individuals should be in a privileged position if they have access or have assets of high value. I've made it very clear when this is not about taking jewellery off people or their wedding rings and so on at the border. That will never happen, but it is right that those who have assets are asked to contribute to the cost of their asylum accommodation.
Abtisam Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Under the previous government, we have had hostile policy after hostile policy, from the go-home bans to Windrush scandal to Rwanda, all of which failed to deter dangerous crossings or fix the asylum system. What is dividing communities is the constant anti-refugee rhetoric pumped into our politics, which has resulted in the vile racism that the Home Secretary has been subjected to, vile racism that I have been subjected to, vile racism that my mother has been subjected to. Let's be clear, there are some people who will never be appeased, who will constantly stir hatred in our communities. The new proposals of forcing refugees to reapply every 2 years just adds huge cost and pressure to an already overstretched system. Has the Home Secretary assessed the cost to the Home Office of processing thousands of repeated applications, an area of law in which I used to practice in, and how will this impact on an already overstretched system facing huge backlogs?
Secretary.
Well, let me tell her, what I think is dividing our country and communities all over our country is an unfair, out-of-control system that's putting pressure on communities across the whole of the nation, and it is incumbent on me as a Home Secretary and on this government to fix that system and to retain public consent for having an asylum system at all. And it is also my job to make sure that we have the administration capacity and the funding to enact these reforms, which we will.
Gareth Snell.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. If you look at a heat map of where asylum dispersals take place, it tends to be in the city London, and then the towns and the cities of the Midlands and the North West that least have the resources to help them. Thankfully, in Stoke-on-Trent, we've got organisations like our CAB and ASHA who are doing what they can. So can I ask the Secretary of State, when she is looking at this policy in the round, as she will do, can she look at that dispersal mechanism to make sure that everyone is taking the support that they should do? And could I also go on the point around the national referral mechanism for modern slavery? It is one of the most difficult pieces to access if you are somebody who has been trafficked into this country. You need to be put in by a national first responder through a third party. Can she set out a little bit about what her changes are going to be and give an assurance that those national first responders won't be removed from that process, because they do a very good job in vetting people before they get access?
I thank my friend for his two questions. Let me assure him that we already run a dispersal model which is designed to ensure that the burden is spread out across the country, and we will carry on doing so. And on modern slavery legislation, we've already consulted. That consultation has closed, and I will be looking carefully at the responses that we have. This is a very well-intentioned, much-needed piece of legislation. I do believe that it's important that we crack down on modern slavery in our country, but it is being used to frustrate legitimate removal of people from this country. I saw that just within the first few days as Home Secretary, where I had to change policy very quickly to prevent people thwarting their referral, their removal to France under the one-in, one-out deal. That is what I have in mind, and those are the changes that we will make.
Colin Naismith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Home Secretary for her statement today and for taking the bold action necessary to tackle the chaos and lack of control that we inherited in our asylum system. But does she agree with me that these changes are as much about incentivising the right behaviour by creating those capped legal routes to asylum as they are about taking tough action to break the status quo, which sees thousands of people crossing the Channel in a dangerous, uncontrolled and unfair way?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I endorse every word that he just said.
Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What measures is the Home Secretary taking to dismantle the criminal gangs exploiting both legitimate and illegitimate businesses to facilitate illegal channel crossings, and can she make details of regulation action that's being taken to prevent the use of assets such as shops on our high streets and supply of life jackets, boats and other components needed in the dangerous crossings by illegal immigrants and by criminal gangs?
Home Secretary.
I can assure her that we are engaging in intense law enforcement work, both through the National Crime Agency and working collaboratively with our partners in Europe, especially in France. There have already been 350 disruptions of organised immigration crime activity. We've confiscated numerous small boats ourselves, and again working with our European partners to do so. The sum total of all of those efforts has prevented 20,000 illegal crossings across the Channel already. We will grow this work. We know it is a very important part of the picture for how we deal with the problem of small boats.
David Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is about fairness. My constituents across Stoke-on-Trent North and Kidsgrove are good, kind and compassionate people. We've got a proud tradition of supporting those who need our help the most, yet they know, like we all do, that the current immigration system is broken. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that, unlike the previous government, who were more concerned about campaigning on the matter, we must take action to bring back that fundamental value, our British value of fairness, so that we can resolve those issues at our borders?
Again, I agree with every word my colleague and my honourable friend has just said. Fairness and contribution, they are Labour values, they're British values, and they underpin the totality of these reforms.
David Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Home Secretary for her statement, and particularly for the commitment to new, safe, legal routes. There's been a lot of talk of morality in this discussion, and there absolutely should be. It's too important to get it wrong. So does she agree with me that tolerating a system where men, women and children are encouraged onto flimsy rubber boats to risk their lives in the English Channel when they are already safe where they are is not a moral choice?
He's absolutely right. Fixing this broken system is a moral mission for me, because I believe we cannot look the other way and pretend that it's just talking points from our political enemies that are driving division in our country. The broken system is what is driving division in our country. I am determined to put that right, to make sure we can divide our country, but also retain public consent for having an asylum system to begin with.
Daniel Francis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Home Secretary for her statement to control our borders, which I know will be welcomed by the majority of constituents across Bexley and Crayford. Now, in recent months, we've seen both our police and enforcement officers, particularly in Crayford, carry out raids and work to arrest people working illegally here. So can I ask the Home Secretary to set how the measures announced today will continue to tackle that work around people working here illegally?
Well, cracking down on illegal working is absolutely crucial to all of these reforms, and to make sure that we can retain public consent for not just our asylum system, but for our legal migration system as well. We've already seen a record number of raids, over 11,000 since this government took office, leading to 8,000 arrests and over 1,000 removals of those with no right to be in this country. We will build on all of that work.
Charlotte Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Warrington has one of the largest communities of Hong Kongers in the country, many of whom I met with over this weekend, where they reiterated their profound concern that the BNO 5+1 scheme is at risk as a result of the government's wider agenda on tackling issues in the asylum and immigration system. Will the Home Secretary give a clear commitment to Hong Kongers that the UK is their home, that the British state will keep its promise to BNOs and Hong Konger refugees, and that the 5+1 scheme is safe?
We are committed and have always supported the repatriation of Hong Kongers. The consultation on earned settlement will be announced to this House very shortly, later this week, I believe, and I look forward to discussing that in detail with her then.
Kat Eccles.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a delegate to the Council of Europe, I will always defend the ECHR and its institution and treaties, and that's why it's important to talk about it in the correct context. In the last 45 years, the Strasbourg Court has ruled against the UK on immigration law rules only 3 times, and in the latest year, for which figures are available, the number of successful human rights-based appeals represented 0.73% of all sentenced foreign national offenders. And the last time Article 8 successfully applied to block deportation was in 2020. So why does the Home Secretary believe that Article 3 and Article 8 of the ECHR are blocking the UK from controlling its borders when the data simply does not back that up?
I don't think that the data relating to the Strasbourg Court is necessarily reflective of what we're seeing in our own courts here at home. It is clear to us that the application of Article 8, which I know she knows is a qualified right, and it is absolutely appropriate for governments to dictate how that right is applied in their individual countries, and we will do so by bringing forward second session legislation. We think that there is a case for reform of Article 8, and there is absolutely a case for continuing the discussions with European partners at the Council of Europe on Article 3, because we are not the only country that is seeing the expansion of Article 3 have implications for the deportation, in particular, of foreign national offenders. The case for reform, we think, is strong. We have the right solutions, but we are signatories to the ECHR, and we will always be so under this government.
Liam Conlon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for her statement? And I was really proud of how my Beckenham and Penge constituency came together to welcome Ukrainian families after the conflict there through schemes such as Homes for Ukraine. I'm pleased the government has announced today to expand safe and legal routes like this, recognising the UK's responsibility and desire to support those in need and removing the need for refugees to make dangerous journeys. Can the Home Secretary set out how quickly we can expect these safe and legal routes to start operating?
Well, I would hope we can move very quickly indeed. As I've said, though, we will do so as we restore order and control to the broken system that we have at the moment. The safe and legal routes will, being candid with the House, begin modest to start with, but will grow over time. As we restore order and control to the current system, we will see those routes grow over time, and we will work with partners from across the philanthropy sector, the UN Refugee Agency, other stakeholders as well, as we design the new community sponsorship models, which will in the future bear the load of helping to bring refugees into this country and to settle them and to ultimately integrate them successfully into this country.
Tony Vaughan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I draw attention to my register of interest. I acknowledge the gargantuan task the Home Secretary has to regain public confidence in our asylum system. We must ensure that, as well as fairness and contribution, that compassion is also reflected in our asylum system, which is also a quintessentially British value and is reflected in the work of charities like Napier Friends in my constituency who support those staying at Napier Barracks. My question is about the appeal reforms in relation to professionally trained adjudicators. What is the rationale for this when we already have a specialist judiciary with expertise to decide these cases? And what is it about the adjudicator model that will mean they are in a better position to decide these cases than under the current system?
Well, firstly, he does mention compassion, and I would say to him that the compassion of our reforms will be reflected in the safe and legal routes where we will accept refugees into our country through a community sponsorship model, resettle and integrate them successfully. That is what will bear the load of fulfilling our international obligations, and I know our people across our country will be proud to do so, because compassion is, he is right, a fundamental value of all of our people, but so is fairness and contribution, and taken together, these reforms, I believe, strike the right balance. And what I can say to him on the appeal system is it's completely shot to pieces at the moment. It's riven with backlogs. Even increasing judicial sitting days does not make the difference. I think it's absolutely appropriate that we design a new appeal system, independent, with early legal advice available right at the start, and where it is proper for the government to set the framework for the speed at which cases can be heard, including fast-tracking those claims that have no chance of success or are from countries which have low grant rates in the first place. He will know that listing at the moment within the current system is a matter for the independent judiciary. We would never seek to interfere with that, but with a new appeal system, we as a government will be able to set the framework for the speed at which cases are heard, as well as the provision of legal advice at the start, so we have one claim, one appeal, and certainty at the end of that process.
Brash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this statement today and can say very clearly to the Home Secretary she will have my complete support in implementing the measures within it and doing whatever it takes to fix our broken asylum system and secure our borders. One of the consequences of this broken system is what can only be described as the targeting of deprived communities like Hartlepool by private companies charged with providing asylum accommodation. We've started to bring the numbers down. Does the Home Secretary agree with me? That process must continue to put fairness back into our system.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. We do need to bring fairness back into the system. We need to resolve the problems with supported asylum accommodation as well. Taken together, these reforms and this government's plans on exiting hotels, getting into large sites instead, I believe will relieve the pressure that he sees in his community and across the country as well.
Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I take great pride in our country's track record of offering sanctuary to people fleeing conflict and persecution, and I know Afghans, Syrians, Ukrainians and many others who are now settled here and making great contributions to our economy and society in our hospitals, our schools and our businesses. So I welcome the Home Secretary's commitment to getting the proposed safe and legal routes working urgently. And will she also ensure that the right incentives and support are in place so that people arriving this way can integrate successfully?
I agree with my honourable friend, and as I've already set out, for those who are on core protection, we will seek to encourage people to move into the protection work and study route so that they can start contributing and integrating more effectively into this country. That will get them to a slightly earlier settlement period as well. But the bulk of these reforms will focus on safe and legal routes, which will be the most privileged route to settlement in this country. It is right that that is the case. It is the best way to integrate people into this country. The community sponsorship model is the way forward, and I look forward to working with her and others in the House as we design that and move forward.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. South Norfolk expects to have a robust and compassionate asylum process. I welcome this statement today. One of the aspects that I'm most interested in is the penultimate paragraph on page 28 of the document, which states that the new model will give greater say to communities and support refugees to settle and become self-sufficient. I was wondering if the Home Secretary could expand on what mechanisms would be put in place to make sure that happens.
Well, we will design the new system, taking all of the learnings from the Homes for Ukraine scheme and other models as well. We will work closely with the UN Refugee Agency as well as other international partners, and we will work with philanthropists and community organisations, local councils, universities, businesses and others here in this country. We know that there are people who really want to be able to sponsor refugees and play their part in offering sanctuary to those most in need. People recognise that the current system is broken. As we get to grips with the current broken system, we will be able to increase the number of people that come on safe and legal routes in the medium and long term, and that is the right future and that is the right compassionate answer, and it enables us to fulfil our international obligations as well.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary has outlined common sense measures to ensure that the British public is no longer asked to fund or accommodate foreign national offenders. At the same time, she is right that our country has a proud and long-standing tradition of offering sanctuary to those fleeing persecution. So therefore, can she confirm that the United Kingdom will send no individual back to a place where they may be tortured, killed or persecuted?
We will never send someone back to a country where they will be tortured. We will always abide by our international obligations in that regard, and we believe that the totality of the reforms that I have set out today strike the right balance between making sure that we continue to fulfil our international obligations but have a system for asylum that can retain public support for having an asylum system at all.
Steve Race.
Deputy Speaker, Exeter is a proud city of sanctuary, and we've welcomed communities of Hong Kongers, Ukrainians and Afghans over recent years. So many of my residents will be very pleased and welcome this re-establishment of safe and legal routes for refugees, which were long forgotten by the party opposite. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that safe and legal routes do offer a real sort of element of a system that has control and order in it, and can she set out how the system will be flexible in terms of when geopolitical practices change?
Well, we will always retain the flexibility to respond to particular crises, as we've done in the past, and that we supported even when the last government was in power. We will design these routes alongside international as well as domestic partners as well, to make sure that the community sponsorship model learns all of the best lessons from previous schemes and is absolutely world-class as a system, so that we can play our full part in offering people sanctuary who most need it.
Joseph.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Home Secretary's statement on how the government will make our asylum policy fit for this country. The broken immigration and asylum system under the Conservatives created an unprecedented backlog. This hindered the Home Office's ability to process legitimate cases, including nurses and care workers working in NHS and care homes who are seeking to extend their work visas. How will the Home Secretary ensure that the measures she has announced will be properly enforced so we can restore order to our borders?
Well, I can assure him it will fall to me to make sure that the system we have is capable of implementing all of these reforms. We will consult and legislate as quickly as possible, and it is on me to make sure that the Home Office can handle the work that's coming its way. But I would assure him that getting the administration is a part of the picture, but getting these reforms passed and implemented across the country is the most important thing that we can do.
Speaker, the measures that the Home Secretary has set out to restore order and fairness will be very welcome in Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland, but the overriding sentiment will be a feeling that we will believe it when we see it. I'm afraid trust is so low after years of broken promises, and so what assurances can the Home Secretary give that she will not only talk the talk but also walk the walk as well?
Oh, I can assure him I don't believe in doing anything other than walking the walk. I totally hear what his constituents will tell him. It's what I hear from my own constituents. We will believe it when we see it, because it is a low-trust environment, and over many years, trust in the immigration system overall has been degraded. It's why it's something that is causing such division today. It is on me to make sure that this package of reforms is implemented. It's on me to make sure that the Home Office is able to implement them effectively, and I would say to his constituents and people all over our country, judge us on what we deliver through these reforms.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The proposal to raise the threshold for indefinite leave to remain from 5 years to 20 is deeply concerning. At a time when far-right groups exploit fear and spread misinformation, our government should lead with compassion and fairness, not forcing some of the most vulnerable in our society to live in limbo for 2 decades. Will the Minister explain how denying security and rights for 2 decades reflects British values of justice and humanity? And what will access to services look like for people during that time?
Tell my honourable friend not to defend a status quo that sees people spend thousands of pounds paying people smugglers a ton of money to get on a boat and come across the channel through a dangerous crossing that puts their own lives and that of others at risk. I would really urge him not to defend a broken status quo, engage with the detail of these proposals which reflect a new protection work and study route which will be open to those who are offered core protection in this country, and that we will open new safe and legal routes as well.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Home Secretary share my concern that the scrutiny from the benches opposite is somewhat sparse this evening? But on a more serious note, can she reassure my constituents that one of the key outcomes of this statement is that we will finally bring down the taxpayers' bill for asylum accommodation? Time and again, this is a concern raised with me by my constituents, and to reduce that bill will help many feel that there is far greater fairness in our asylum system.
Well, I suspect the lower numbers on the other side are down to the fact there's not that many of them anymore. And what I would also say is he's absolutely right on the cost. Fairness and contribution are the principles that underpin this asylum policy statement. And I hope that as we bring costs down, we can retain public support for the asylum system overall.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there are quite a few things needing challenged in this statement. First off is that Britain has always been a welcoming, generous and warm place for immigrants and people seeking asylum. There will be many people from an Irish background whose ancestors faced prejudice, as there will be many Jews and Muslims that have been the victims of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And let's not forget about the Windrush scandal. With what we have heard today, I'm afraid the government has surrendered to past discriminations and the vile rhetoric of reform that we hear today. Does the Home Secretary not see that removing the legal obligation to support asylum seekers who would be otherwise destitute is as far away from Labour Party principles and values as we can get?
Again, I would just really urge my honourable friend not to defend a broken status quo and not to defend people who commit crimes and are funded by the British taxpayer while they do so.
Jonathan Hinder.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Having gangsters control who comes into our country is intolerable. It's not fair, it's not humane, it's not socialist. And my constituents in Pendle and Clitheroe say to me that they just want control. They want the politicians they send to this chamber to make the decisions on who comes into this country, not the gangsters. So can the Home Secretary reassure my constituents that she will not rest until every migrant, refugee or otherwise, comes to this country through a safe and legal route?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He is absolutely right. There is nothing humane or socialist or indeed any other group that people might want to put themselves into about paying people smugglers a lot of money to get into a boat in the Channel. It's a dangerous thing to do. It fuels further crime. It is not the way that people should seek to come to this country, and I will not rest until the way that people come to this country to seek refuge, be granted refugee status, is through a safe and legal route instead.
Final question, Amanda.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to start by fully supporting the Home Secretary's statement today and in getting the balance right. In Ports of North, we've seen how quickly immigration misinformation can spread on our high streets, on local forums and even, Madam Deputy Speaker, forcing businesses to put up signs on developments to say who will be living there. This chaos took hold because the Tories never got a grip, gave up on governing and allowed division to reign across our country. Does the Home Secretary agree that our new enforcement plans and streamlined appeals system are essential not only to enable much-needed action, but also essential to restore trust and give clarity to stop refuelling misinformation division in our communities?
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend, and I endorse every word that she said, Madam Deputy Speaker.
And that concludes the statement. Point of order, Carla Denyer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State accused one of my Green colleagues of hypocrisy when in fact She was objecting to the warehousing of asylum seekers in military barracks, which is a position in line with Greens in the Chamber and, in fact, all major refugee rights organisations. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do wonder if the Secretary of State would like to withdraw her grossly misleading remarks and baseless accusation of hypocrisy.
Point of order, Adnan Hussain. I understand that this also relates to remarks made by the Home Secretary.
Intervention, the Home Secretary stated, and I quote, that she shouldn't be surprised to see the honourable gentleman indulging in misinformation in here. Madam Deputy Speaker, I take my responsibilities in this House extremely seriously. I'm confident that every point I raised was made in good faith, based on publicly available information, and was neither misleading nor inaccurate. May I therefore seek your guidance on how a member may respond or have the record clarified when a minister makes such characterisation without providing any evidence, clarification or correction, in particular where it risks implying dishonesty on the part of a member who has had no opportunity to respond further at that moment.
Say in response to him, I'm very happy to say it wasn't misleading, it was just wrong. So I can clarify that for the record. And let me say to the Honourable Lady opposite, I don't think, I think it's a fair point of debate to point out that the Green Party is often indulging in hypocrisy, and I shall look at carefully at what her colleague has said in relation to the large military sites. But I would say to her, the Green Party never seem to offer any solutions, only commentary that does not work.
And I thank both members for their points of order, and their comments are now on the record. We now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Bill Committee.
No.
Order.
Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Bill.
I remind members that in committee, members should not address the Chair as Deputy Speaker. Please use our names when addressing the Chair. Madam Chair, Chair and Madam Chairman are also accepted.